Archaea has always been the home of mages. A long time ago, the country was full of the most powerful mages. But when humanity was deprived of this blessing, Archaea lost its ancient power, and it became a small kingdom. Left at the mercy of the great powers, the country placed its hopes on other means of survival, such as marriage. At dusk, a young man, the second prince of the kingdom of Archaea, Sander Cadoril, who lived in a rich palace, rushed into the room. He begged them to tell him that the latest news was a lie. He tried to convince his sister that it wasn't too late to reconsider her decision. There was a young blonde woman and a man in the room. The man asked Sander to calm down, because this conversation was not for other people's ears. This was the first prince of the kingdom of Archaea, Dietrich Cadoril. Sander shouted that this is incomprehensible to the mind. How can you force your sister to become the wife of Quanak Ryodan? Outside the palace walls, there were strange conversations about him. People say that Archaea secured a miserable peace by selling the princess to a bloodthirsty tyrant who kills people for fun. The first princess of the kingdom of Archaea, Ezebia Cadoril, asked her younger brother to calm down. She said that it wasn't brother Dietrich who wanted this wedding, but herself. It was entirely her decision, so there is no need to make a scene. Sander knelt beside his sister's chair and started crying. Ezebia assured him that everything would be fine, but the child must take care of his father, be a good boy, and obey his brother. The child sat on the girl's lap and burst into tears. Ezebia stroked his head, trying to calm him down. Dietrich watched all this in silence. Then he turned to his sister and thanked her for everything she had done for the kingdom and the people of Archaea. Ezebia thought about it. She always knew that for a noble girl, marriage for love is a real luxury. This alliance is the only way to protect Archaea from imminent danger. And now, she will have to regret her fate, because saving the country is an honor for Ezebia. Soon the wedding ceremony took place. Ezebia agreed to take Quanak Ryodan as husband, and the emperor agreed to marry her. The girl dared not look up at her future husband. He was a tall, strong man with lightly tanned skin. Soon, the priest declared the couple husband and wife in the name of the initiator and destroyer of the goddess Vakar, and now their union had to be sealed with a kiss or an oath. Quanak lifted his bride's veil, revealing her face. He asked her to close her eyes and lean towards her lips. The next moment, the newlyweds merged in their first kiss, which was brief, because the girl did not feel comfortable. When Quanak moved away from her, Ezebia touched her lips, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. However, she understood that they had exchanged an oath kiss. Now there was no turning back. From that day on, this man was her husband. When the ceremony ended, Quanak's subordinates and he himself saddled their horses, and they were ready to leave. Ezebia was in the carriage. Her mood was depressing. Even the wedding ceremony was conducted in a hurry, as if her husband had been stolen from her. But given the circumstances, this is understandable. This is an entirely new kingdom, so the emperor cannot leave his state for long. Ezebia didn't understand. Did that mean he put the country first? The girl opened the window of her carriage and thought about her husband. Rumors circulated that he was a real tyrant. However, up close he looked like a god. He inspires respect from everyone around him, not like her, an inexperienced young woman. The Cadoril family has received the blessing of the guardian of the Silver Forest. In every generation, a mage awakens, destined to reveal the magic flowing deep underground and protect the country. In this generation, Ezebia became a mage, but she received only a small part of the magical powers. The girl was overwhelmed by the question, could she handle the title of empress? She supposed she would simply be thrown out when the emperor got tired of her, and these thoughts made her feel pathetic. While the girl indulged in her thoughts, a stranger in a black coat watched her from behind the trees, with a ball of dark magic swirling in his hand. Suddenly, Ezebia heard the crunching of branches. She looked out the window to see who was hiding behind the trees. But before she could think of anything, a magic arrow was right in front of her face. A terrible sound was heard, and a moment later the emperor and his subordinates realized that the carriage was under attack. Ezebia emerged, with streams of blood dripping from the corners of her mouth. The arrow stuck out of her chest, right where the heart is. The girl convulsively clutched the wound, from which blood was rapidly gushing. At that moment, memories of the recent past came to mind. She was sitting in her palace with her brother. She was afraid. She did not want to go to the Ryodan kingdom and marry Vanak. The mere thought of it horrified her. But was there really any other way to save the empire? Dietrich said it hurt him to see his sister suffer, but what could they do? After all, Archaea has almost no strength left to fight, Its warriors are exhausted. Its supplies have run out, and there is simply nowhere to retreat. And only a mage capable of protecting the state can save them. This is reality, and they must do whatever is necessary to survive. And now, dying from an arrow to the heart, Ezebia understood that Dietrich was right. If only she had enough strength to protect Archaea, then she would have been useful at least. And this would not have happened. Ezebia almost lost consciousness when she suddenly heard someone calling her and asking her to open her eyes, which made the girl jerk up and scream. She didn't understand how she did it, because she had just been hit by an arrow. Then the heroine looked around, and behind her she saw Quanach, holding the girl's body in his arms. Ezebia looked closely at his face, blood dripping from the corners of his mouth, and her dress was covered in scarlet bloodstains. Then she realized that that girl was herself. The emperor's subjects urged him to release the girl, because she was already dead. Kavana said sadly that it was all his fault, that he should not have trusted these dirty northerners. He shouldn't have even agreed to these vile games. Ezebia understood where everything was going and tried to stop the emperor, but he didn't listen to her. His voice seemed to dissolve into the void. Kavana declared that their alliance was destroyed, and that Archaea would pay for its betrayal with blood. The man mounted his horse, ordered everyone to return, and immediately begin preparations for war. Ezebia tried to stop him, but the man did not listen to her, so she ran after him. However, she could not move far from the carriage. Her whole body was filled with pain. It seemed to her as if she was about to be torn apart. She could not move. The bleeding wound in her chest reminded her of herself with sharp pain, and suddenly, Ezebia heard someone's footsteps. It was a young man who said that the kingdom would have to face its own destruction. Then he leaned towards the pool of blood where Ezebia's body had just lain. He began to groan, saying that this poor girl was still breathing while bleeding. The heroine recognized the man as her brother Dietrich. She was delighted to see him and immediately crawled towards him, hoping he could save her. At that moment, another man approached Dietrich and told him that His Highness should be satisfied with the implementation of the plan. Dietrich smeared his fingers with Ezebia's blood and said he was more than satisfied, that they had finally gotten rid of all interference. The girl was in shock. She could not believe what she was hearing. Dietrich stood up and said it would be good to check for himself that she was dead. The stranger said the arrow hit the heart. Death was guaranteed. Ezebia was stunned. She could not believe this was really happening. Dietrich told the man that this was not the end of the deal, that he only allowed him to deal with his sister, because he promised to provide him with the power that could destroy the Ryodan Empire. The stranger said he could rest assured that the long war would end with Archaea's victory. Dietrich's name will spread gloriously across the continent. Dietrich said he was not happy that Quanah took Ezebia's body, because she was born a mage, so even her corpse would have been useful. Ezebia did not understand why her brother, whom she loved so much, was doing this to her. When the men left, the heroine remained alone, sitting on the ground near the carriage where she was murdered. As Dietrich said, the war between Archaea and the Ryodan kingdoms soon began again, and Ezebia became a ghost, trapped in the forest where she was killed. It was pure hell. The girl could find no explanation for the horrors she was forced to witness. She could only watch, because she could no longer change anything. But this war seemed endless. After accusing the Ryodan Empire of killing the princess, Dietrich planned to win by allying with a small northern state. But Quanath quickly faced everyone, winning victory after victory. He drove Archaea into deeper and deeper despair. In the face of war, everything lost its meaning. The forests and fields of beautiful Archaea and everyone Ezebia loved, all this disappeared before her eyes. The cold, lifeless bodies of her father and brother Sander were like a mockery of her foolish death. In the third year of the war, Dietrich was captured and brought before Emperor Quanah. He called him a fool and a pathetic slave. Quanah killed his entire family. He seized his lands, but it was still not a victory. The Qatari family would curse him forever. Kavana just smiled at the fact that King Archaea still didn't calm down. He could curse him even after death, so that he would scream and get rid of his ghost. The next moment he cut off Dietrich's head, the ghost of Ezebia witnessed this. Kavana's sinister figure loomed over the man's corpse, blood dripping from his sword. He ordered his subordinates to burn everything here. When everyone left, Ezebia bent over her dead brother, whose body lay on the ground covered in bloody swords. She wondered if that was what he wanted, if his plans were more important than her brother and father. Then Ezebia turned to the silver forest to let it hear her cry and help her. She begged the forest to take her soul and give Arkia another chance. She wanted a chance to go back in time. Suddenly, a bright light shone in the sky. A mysterious voice addressed Azebia. It called the girl its dear daughter, and then whispered something in an unknown language. And then Azebia lost consciousness. She woke up in her family's palace. Her father and Sander were sitting by her bed. When the girl opened her eyes, they immediately rushed to hug her. But Azebia did not understand what was happening and how she got here. Everything seemed so unreal to her. She saw with her own eyes the corpses of her relatives. She saw their pale faces and lifeless, and now they are alive and well. Azebia's father told the doctor that the princess had a difficult night, and he wanted to know if there would be any side effects upon waking. The doctor said everything would be fine. The princess changed the color of her eyes and hair. This is typical of a mage, but this is the first time in the last 100 years that this has happened, so they don't know all the details. Then the heroine thought about it. Magic awakened when she was 10 years old, so it turns out she traveled back in time, but this couldn't have happened. It seemed to Azebia that she was going crazy, or it was all just hallucinations. Then Sander leaned towards her and asked her not to get sick anymore, because they had to be together as long as possible. The girl touched her brother's cheeks. They were soft and warm. It definitely wasn't a dream. She lowered her head. Sander hugged her by the shoulders, not understanding what was happening. Azebia burst into tears. The Silver Forest heard her pleas. Then she hugged her brother tightly, embracing him with all her love. She thanked the Silver Forest for getting another chance and promised not to lose it for anything. She promised to protect her family and the state at any cost. When Azebia calmed down and was left alone, she began to think that for this she would need strength, which would be more powerful than that of any guardian. The patron deity of Arkai is the Silver Forest. It was the sister of the goddess Fakar. After death, she was reborn and became a silver tree at the end of the world. The inhabitants of Arkai began to ask for a blessing from the Silver Forest. Those who received the blessing became the guardians of Arkai. These heroes protected the kingdom from any danger, but the glorious days of Arkai passed. Suddenly, magic disappeared across the entire continent. The blessing of the forest disappeared. There were no guardians left in Arkai, and the country was on the verge of destruction. Azebia's awakening became the only hope for the people. They were glad that a guardian finally appeared among them. She became a true treasure of the kingdom. However, it soon became known that Azebia could not use the necessary magic. The only thing she could do as a guardian was talk to the trees and flowers. Perhaps something went wrong during the awakening. The trees were very kind to her. They said they couldn't have become friends with Azebia if she hadn't awakened her magic. She simply didn't realize how lucky she was. However, this didn't help the girl fight against people's criticism. In a past life, she could only witness the destruction of the kingdom, but now everything is different. If the Silver Forest really granted her wish, it must have given her the power to protect the state. Azebia was distracted from her thoughts by a bright light that suddenly appeared in the pot she was using for magic practice. The next moment, a green sprout emerged from the ground. Azebia wondered if this was all she got, if she came back to life just for this. If the Silver Forest had not granted her wish. Of course, her magical power was greater now than in her previous life. However, it is still not enough to stop Quina. She was distracted from her thoughts by a voice. Someone entered her room and called her. Azebia immediately realized who it was. It was her brother Dietrich, standing at the door and smiling. Azebia shyly called him by name, and then got up from her chair to meet the boy halfway. Dietrich heard that his sister had already woken up. He also heard that she felt intense pain after waking up. Azebia looked at her brother's face and felt like she was transported back to the day of her death. When she learned that her brother had betrayed her, she remembered his words that even the corpse of a mage like Azebia would be useful. Then she hit him on the arm. She didn't want him to touch her. The girl immediately apologized for this act, explaining that she simply hadn't come to her senses after waking up. She is very sensitive now and hopes for her brother's understanding. Dietrich said that Azebia was clearly still recovering, and it seemed she really went through a difficult time. Then he took her hands and told her that sooner or later she would definitely get better. Azebia felt uncomfortable. Every action seemed like a pretext to her, as she now knows her brother's true intentions. Dietrich said he had news he wouldn't like to deliver under such circumstances, but that his heart was breaking with pain. The thing is, Azebia has now become the new guardian, but many are outraged. And they still don't believe in the blessing of the Silver Forest. They doubt that the princess can really use magic. The girl was indignant, but she didn't have time to say anything. Dietrich kept talking. He said he didn't consider her magic to be fiction. However, he was interested in knowing the reason for such doubts in society. After all, Ezebia was awakened by the guardian, but she still cannot cast a single spell. However, he urged his sister not to blame herself. There is no need to get too worked up. The heroine was perplexed by what was happening. This face of her brother and his words seemed strangely familiar. And then she remembered a moment from her past. She told her brother that she could use magic. She talked to the garden flowers, and they told her about their past. So the girl thought that was her ability, but she didn't know what to do with it. Then Dietrich told her that this was not magic, but stupid tricks, and that people would get angry if they found out the princess was so weak. He urged her to remain silent about her powers, and only then could he protect her. People whispered that the princess still couldn't use her magic, but Dietrich assured them it wouldn't be a big deal, because he would take care of everything. Then, Ezebia's mind was again pierced by the memory of her heart, and the arrow that had been shot into her heart by her brother's order. Suddenly, the heroine felt dizzy. She took a step back and rested her hand on the table. The girl wanted to answer something, when suddenly she felt someone touching her shoulders with their hands. A woman's voice whispered to her that Ezebia knew this would happen. She would not be able to do anything to protect Archaea and get revenge. This voice was Ezebia from a past life. Her soul was trying to sow doubt in her reborn personality. The girl tried to convince herself that this was just an illusion. Then the ghost said that the Silver Forest didn't choose Ezebia. It just wanted her to go through all this hell again. The girl waved her hand, trying to drive the ghost away from her. Dietrich looked at her stunned, but she said she was fine. Ezebia decided that first, she had to go to the Silver Forest. Even if he didn't intend to save her, she still needed to find out what it wanted from her. Soon the heroine arrived with her subjects at the northern forest, at the very border of the world. The men tried to dissuade the princess, because it was not safe here at all, and she needed to return. However, Ezebia said she could not return yet. Some time before this, the girl told her father that she wanted to go to the Silver Forest. The girl believed that she had already awakened, so she needed to go there. However, her father was against it. He said that the Silver Forest does not allow anyone entry, except the king of Archaea, and even the king is only allowed to visit it once. The Silver Forest is not that merciful. Sometimes it is kind and sometimes fierce, like a winter storm. One day, a man fell to his knees, begging for Ezebia's mother to be brought back to life. But the forest did not listen to his desperate prayers. The resurrection of the dead contradicts the principles of the goddess Fakar, and then the man was left alone with his grief, and his limbs frozen from the cold. However, Ezebia promised that she would return if there was a snowstorm. Her father had nothing to worry about, as she was the guardian of Archaea, and a princess blessed by the forest. The girl believed that the goddess would not harm her. She should tell her how to save the kingdom. Then, the man suggested that the forest itself was inviting Ezebia. He pulled something out of his pocket and handed it to his daughter. It was a pendant that retained the warmth created by the dwarves. A man bought it for his already dead wife, and now he hoped it would help his daughter. And now, as Ezebia was in the forest, she clutched the pendant in her hands. Thanks to it, her body stayed warm. She mentally thanked her father for his help. Ezebia no longer wanted to lose her loved ones. She intended to change her destiny. And now she only had one way out. Perhaps she didn't have that much magical power, but the girl remembered how to use it correctly. She was going to use her only skill and contact the forest trees to let her into the grove. The princess's subjects suddenly noticed that the weather had worsened and a snowstorm was approaching. Ezebia understood. Apparently, the forest heard her. She asked her subjects to wait for her here and ventured deeper into the forest. It was much colder in the wilderness. The frost chilled the girl to the bone. Suddenly, she heard a voice. Someone calling Ezebia by her name, calling her their daughter. The heroine looked up and saw a large tree with silver leaves. She realized it was a silver forest. The voice said they had finally met again, and then asked what had brought the girl here. Ezebia thought that voice was very familiar to her. When she heard it, it was like going back in time. So the heroine decided to ask the goddess Archaea why she had returned her to life, and what she should do to avoid the terrible ending she so feared. Because she had already made a promise and was willing to keep it, she just needed the power that would allow her to protect the country. Then, suddenly, a voice said that Ezebia seemed to have misunderstood everything. The goddess had been watching her this whole time, but she did not hear her pleas. This is a privilege only for kings, and the girl knew it. Ezebia was confused. She was sure she had heard the voice of the goddess. She thought she had been resurrected to fulfill her promise. Then, the voice asked the girl to go home. Her body was still too fragile for such frost. The pendant would soon stop helping. She needed to return to her father. However, Azebia stated that she didn't care. She would rather die here than watch people die and not even be able to stop it. The voice tried to dissuade her, but the girl did not give up. She knelt down and said she wanted to protect the country herself. The girl begged the goddess to tell her what to do. Then, the voice said that Azebia leaves her no other choice. Even though she is a guardian, she has little strength, and all because the goddess's powers have dried up, which means she has some blame in the girl's difficult past. The goddess said she would share her life force with the girl. Maybe she could save Arkai's future. Suddenly, Azebia heard another voice, more sinister. It said the goddess could not be trusted. The silver forest said nothing stops the girl now. She must follow the call of her heart, and she will succeed. But the voice of Azebia's ghost stopped her. It said the girl had become stronger, but she was still destined for a tragic end, just like in her previous life. Then Azebia said, since this is her fate, so be it. She pressed her palms against the ground, putting all her strength into them, and then green roots grew out of the snow. This was the fruit of her magic. The girl said she was tired of being afraid, so she wouldn't give up on her goal. The story continues some time after Azebia visited the Silver Forest. At one of the outposts, there was an altercation between the guards. One of them fell asleep at his post, and the second one didn't like it much. Their fight was interrupted by people entering through the gate. At the front was Her Highness Azebia Cadorl, who was already 20 years old. The guard immediately ran to meet her and informed her that after the girl blocked the border, there were far fewer casualties. The thorny vine perfectly protected the wall, and the arrows and shields it created showed their effectiveness against monsters. The man said it sounded funny, but sometimes it seemed to him that he and Azebia were comrades in arms who had been through the whole war. When she heard about the war, the girl smiled nervously. Images from her past life flashed through her head again as she hovered over the bodies of her father and her dead brother. Then, the girl said that the guard is much smarter than he tries to appear. 10 years have passed since Azebia returned to the past. The Silver Forest made her stronger, and she gained the ability to accelerate the growth of flowers and trees. She learned to create barriers from monsters and imbue arrows with magic. And although Azebia's entire body literally screamed from overexertion, she understood that she still couldn't relax. Even in this life, she already hears terrible news about Emperor Raiden. They are expanding the borders too quickly and will soon reach her country. Under Azebia's leadership, the army has become stronger, but it is still too weak to resist Quena. However, the heroine was determined. She would not give up and would not allow him to destroy Arkaya. Suddenly, the conversation between the princess and the man was interrupted by another guard. He said that a letter had arrived from the Empire, personally from Emperor Quena. Azebia tensed up. She was determined to protect this country at all costs, even if it meant marrying this man. In his letter, Quena stated that he only had one demand, the Princess of Arkai, and they could keep the rest. The rulers of the country were furious because this man had so brazenly asked for her hand and Azebia's heart, but they did not want to hand the princess over to this savage. The heroine indifferently watched their discontent. These people easily got rid of her in a past life, and now they protect her, knowing that she can be useful. The only thing that hasn't changed at all is Quana's demand. He is a slave who became an emperor. Perhaps his past was even worse than Azebia's, and now she wondered if that's why he had become so cruel. However, the girl decided it was none of her business. Then Dietrich joined the conversation. He said there was nothing more painful than sending his beloved sister to foreign lands. But as the king of Arkai, he had to put the country first. Azebia noticed that her brother spoke very well indeed, but he was going to get rid of her. Dietrich turned to his sister and asked if she understood the reason for such a decision. Because she was the guardian of their country, and the girl replied that she understood everything. She said she had been waiting for this opportunity her whole life. A week later, he showed up in Azebia's room late at night and said he just wanted to say goodbye before she left. Dietrich said they wouldn't see each other soon, but the girl said it was better for him to get straight to the point. Then he threw a pendant with a dark blue stone onto the table. Dietrich said this is a communication crystal. Thanks to the spell, you can establish a connection remotely. He asked Azebia to take it with her to the Empire and inform him of everything she could find out about the Emperor. Dietrich said the words that this marriage is a condition for a peace treaty are a lie. In fact, this is an ideal way to delay time to prepare. Then Ezebia screamed, because if the emperor found out about this, everyone would feel bad, and a war could start. The man just smiled. It turned out they were already preparing for war, so he approached his sister. Ezebia couldn't believe what she heard, but her brother continued. He said they would wait until the empire lowered its guard. They had already made an alliance with the northern countries. Besides, they have a very strong ally, and if you prepare well, killing Quanach will be a piece of cake. Ezebia thought she should have guessed all this sooner, because Dietrich didn't just obtain these magical objects. Things like this cannot be created without magical power. This means he contacted the people who killed her in her previous life again. Dietrich is trying to create an alliance in the north that will cause chaos across the entire continent. Ezebia understood that if she rejected him, he would start a war by killing her. Didn't she understand if there was any way to avoid that destiny? Did the heroine think her efforts would be enough to stop Dietrich? But she couldn't really change the future. The man asked his sister if she really thought marriage with Quanach would solve all her problems. When he realized the girl was going to answer yes, he called her foolish. And then he handed her the secret papers he had brought especially for her. Dietrich stated that the guardians of Arkai are destined for only one fate. Becoming a guardian inevitably imposes the burden of serving the northern forest. Outside the kingdom, Ezebia will not be able to use her powers, and it is also impossible to pass magic on to her descendants. He stated that the northern forest took away the girl's chance to have children. Ezebia immediately stated that was a lie. However, Dietrich asserted that this was true, that only the king had access to the archive, and that these documents were hidden in a secret library. Quanach's disappointment knows no bounds when he discovers that the bride he has chosen cannot have children. Dietrich said he would become enraged and crush Maria Archia to the ground. Then Ezebia pushed her brother away, saying he was lying and she didn't want to hear it anymore. But the man stood firm. He said the documents said nothing about the children of the guardians. The heroine was horrified. Although she didn't want to believe it, it could turn out to be true. And then she could only await her sad end. Meanwhile, the story moves to a beautiful living spring, bathed in sun rays. The emperor's assistant said there were many thieves here, so a man shouldn't walk around without armor. Quanach asked them to give him clothes quickly, because he couldn't meet the princess in this state. Soon the wedding day of Ezebia and Quanach arrived. The girl was on the balcony of the palace. A maid immediately ran up to her and covered the bride's shoulders with a cloak. Because it was cold here, she didn't understand why the princess was so pale on her wedding day. Ezebia thought about the night her brother left. She spent the night digging through the archives of Arkai. Dietrich's words turned out to be true. Nothing was said here about the children of the guardians. All mages give birth to children with abilities, which is why the Ryodan Empire so demanded to see Ezebia as a bride. They want to raise an heir with magical abilities. But guardians are different from common mages. Their magic is a blessing granted by the Silver Forest. You cannot be born with it. It turns out Dietrich was right. All guardians are infertile. Ezebia will not be able to give birth to a child, but as soon as the emperor finds this out, the peace treaty will end. The shouts of the people distracted her from her thoughts. They reported that Emperor Ryodan had arrived to create a marriage alliance. Ezebia looked from the balcony. Men on horseback were passing right below her. The guards ordered the gates of the capital to be opened and the ruler to be received with honors. Then, the heroine realized that this was actually her future husband, Quanach Ryodan. When the girl returned to her room, she began to think about what to do. This union is doomed to be short-lived. She will not be able to prevent Quanach's invasion. Last night, Dietrich tried to use her for his own ends, instead of killing her as he did in his previous life. He even told her the truth about the rulers. He must think that Ezebia is a useful pawn. This gave her an advantage, because as long as she was this useful, he couldn't just get rid of her. And now the heroine needs to show the same to the emperor. She must discard frivolity. He must not discover the secret of the guardians. Ezebia was distracted from her thoughts by the sound of the door opening. Quanach was standing in the doorway, and although the girl was surprised to see him here, she quickly composed herself and said it was a great honor for her to meet the emperor in person. Suddenly, Quanach extended his palm and touched her hair. Then, suddenly, he announced that the girl didn't seem very happy about their engagement. Ezebia immediately declared that this wasn't entirely true. She accepted marrying the emperor with great happiness. Quanach smiled and said that her lie was sweeter than a kiss. The heroine said she would never lie to his majesty, but the man asked her not to call him that. He didn't like all those manners, and he would like the girl to call him by his name. If it wasn't too difficult for her. Asivia didn't understand what was happening. Did he treat her the same way in her previous life? Then, Kwanna asked the bride if he could call her by her name, if he did the same for her, and call her Asivia. The heroine was speechless. She didn't remember the man like this. In a past life, Kwanna Ryodin didn't even visit her before the wedding ceremony, and he didn't even call her by her name. Such a long silence confused the emperor. He supposed the girl didn't know his name. However, Asivia said she knew him, and then timidly spoke the emperor's name. Quanek. The time for the wedding ceremony was approaching. The maids looked at their princess with tears in their eyes. Asivia looked charming in a white wedding dress, and some of the maids couldn't hold back their tears. They said the princess deserved more. She should have a more elegant dress. But the heroine thought to herself that this dress was already quite elegant compared to the one she wore for the wedding in her previous life. The girl understood that a wedding is not a battlefield, but risking her life. And moving to another country is no joke either. Her future husband took her, expecting an heir capable of using magic. Asivia knew that she could only protect the people if she made them believe she could give them what they wanted. Soon the priest declared the couple husband and wife, and the time came to seal the union with an oath kiss. Asivia looked at her husband and noticed he still looked the same, without a single flaw on his face. She then thought he looked like a god, but after what she had witnessed in the war, she no longer felt the tremor in her chest. This is not marriage, but just a means to achieve peace. Therefore, she didn't care how Quanek would treat her. Then, the man leaned towards his wife and gave her an insistent and demanding kiss. Suddenly, Asivia asked him to stop. The guests observed everything that was happening. Among them was also the heroine's brother, Dietrich. Asivia was confused. She thought her heart wasn't beating faster, but her body said otherwise. Quanna hugged the girl close to him and asked if she was okay, but Asivia just nodded silently. This time, there was no wedding trouble. It seemed to Asivia that the servants packing her things for the move were even more hurried than last time. The heroine looked towards her castle, where she had lived her whole life, and squeezed the communication crystal in her hands. She immediately heard Dietrich's voice. He said that his sister made the right decision by contacting him. His decision would help them save Arkaya. Asivia noticed that all this sounded depressing. The emperor distracted her from her thoughts. He called the girl and approached her from behind. The heroine thought that if they didn't have children in the next few years, Kvanna would realize she was infertile, and then his plan and Dietrich's would fail. Kvanna looked at the girl silently and then laughed mysteriously. Then he turned around and said he would go with Asivia. She knew that was not the custom here. Usually the newlyweds do not travel in the same carriage, but he was worried, so he simply could not leave the girl. Quanek knelt near the carriage steps and held out his hand to the girl, inviting her to enter. Asivia didn't know how to react. Then the man asked her not to make the emperor kneel for so long. However, the girl took her husband's hand and noticed that it was very strange. Now everything was completely different from how it was in her previous life. Quanna had visited her before the wedding, and now he was on his knees. She needed to remain indifferent, but she still had a strange feeling. Asivia didn't know where all this would lead. It could be a good or bad sign. As the carriage departed, the heroine kept looking out the window. Quanna noticed that the girl was still sad. He asked her if she wasn't feeling well, or if she was thinking of running away from an unwanted engagement. Asivia immediately got angry. This was an extremely ridiculous choice of reason. From now on, she is the emperor's wife and must fulfill her duties. Quanna chuckled and asked if all princesses were really that loyal. If she really thought that kissing a man she didn't like was her responsibility. So, Asivia decided to ask her husband why such questions. In his opinion, he thought the girl couldn't stand him. Then Kvanna said that he had long wanted to ask what his fiancé thought of him. Asivia nervously gripped the fabric of her dress in her hands, saying that Emperor Ryodin is a true hero. Stories about him reached her ears even before the wedding. She also heard about his origins. Kvanna simply dismissed it. He didn't care what they said behind his back. He was interested in what Asivia herself thought of him. Does she really think he is also a hero? Suddenly, before the heroine's eyes, images of her past life reappeared. She remembered Quanek's face, splattered with someone else's blood. Then she looked at the man, but could not give him a clear answer. Quanek sighed tiredly. It was all as he thought. They were already married, and Asivia was still treating him cautiously. After the ceremony, she was pale as snow, and apparently his assumptions turned out to be true. This marriage was a mistake. Ezebia realized that with such an attitude, a man could break the engagement. But she could not afford that. So she got up from her seat and shouted that she had misunderstood everything, that she was not at all unhappy with this marriage. Kwanak immediately asked her to return to her place, because the girl might fall if they stopped suddenly. Before the emperor had time to finish speaking, the horses suddenly reared up, and the carriage stopped. Ezebia immediately staggered and lost her balance. She was already preparing to fall when suddenly Kwanak caught her. He hugged the bride and asked if she was hurt. Ezebia looked forward, stunned and with flushed cheeks. Kwanak looked at her face with concern and asked what happened to her. The girl just kept silent. Then the emperor assumed she wasn't feeling well. At that moment, one of the emperor's subjects approached the carriage. Kavana asked why they were stopping. The man said the road was blocked by a fallen tree. His people are already clearing the way, so they will soon return to Ursh. Kavana was surprised when they approached Arkai. The tree was still. Suddenly, the man directed his attention to Ezebia. She was trembling, her face was pale, and she was frantically clutching her heart. Ezebia was overwhelmed by several thoughts. Power is granted to guardians by the Silver Forest, so outside of Arkai, she will not be able to use it. This was one of the secrets Dietrich told her that night. The girl thought everything was a lie. However, now that she realized it was true, she felt her strength leaving her. Without magic, Ezebia will not be able to defend herself, especially if she is attacked. Then she heard the voice of a ghost from a past life again. She asked if her brother had deliberately sent her out of the country. The voice said that he planned all this. He only wants to get rid of his sister and start a war. And in the end, poor Ezebia will die again. She is doomed to suffer. The heroine covered her ears with her hands and shouted that she no longer wanted to listen to the ghost. Seeing his wife in this state, Kwanak immediately hugged her, wiped her tears, and tried to calm her down. He asked Ezebia to take a deep breath and look around. She was safe. Kavana confidently stated that no one here could harm the girl. After this situation, some time passed. Night fell. The imperial carriage was already approaching the ship's port, and then Kwanak decided to apologize. He said he had been bothering the girl all day. Her journey must have become even more painful. He was trying to get her attention because the girl wasn't looking at him at all. Kwanak was aware that Ezebia was against the marriage, but reality was not so easy to accept. However, no matter what she thought of him, the man promised he would not break the engagement. He gave her his word that from now on there would be peace between their countries. Therefore, Ezebia could stop looking at him with so much fear in her eyes. The girl just stared silently at the emperor. Now she understood why he was so different. In her previous life, they didn't even talk in private. That's why she never wanted to know him better. So, Ezebia said she wasn't lying when she said she had heard about Kwanak's exploits. It was ironic that she started studying reports on Kwanak to better understand the enemy's weaknesses. But the more she learned about him, the more she began to doubt if this was the Kwanak she knew before. He is a former slave who fought to free himself from the oppressive rules of the previous emperor. Ezebia then declared that she was not afraid of Kwanak and that she was very happy with their engagement. And she also thanked him for helping her calm down. The girl deliberately called the emperor by his name because he asked to be called Kwanak. The man looked at his wife in surprise. He was certainly happy to hear all this. Suddenly, someone called the emperor, and he immediately looked out the window. Ezebia also looked out the window, and then the coachman said that the pier was already visible. The heroine looked fascinated at the pier, where several enormous ships were located. She realized that the future had truly changed. She did not die, and the war between the empires stopped. Now the future was a mystery to Ezebia. The girl tried to calm herself, saying that everything would be fine, she could feel it. Meanwhile, at the pier, two men were in a hurry to meet the carriage. One of them asked the other what he was thinking about. The green-haired man was worried that the wedding ceremony ended too hastily. He couldn't believe that the emperor would really leave immediately after the oath. Because for a whole month, he had only been talking about the wedding with the princess. The man said that the emperor's carriage had left the forest. The green-haired one chuckled. In that case, they must have gone to see who the bride was. Soon the carriage arrived at the pier. Ezebia couldn't take her eyes off the giant ship that was nearby. Kwanak helped the girl out of the carriage and told her that a simple boat would not have survived the journey they had to overcome. So they chose this one. He also asked the girl to watch her step because it was dark outside, and she could fall. Ezebia said that the emperor was worrying too much. She was carefully observing the path. The next moment, her heels stumbled on a pebble, and the girl began to fall quickly forward. However, Kavana again managed to catch her before she could fall, and the man held the girl tightly. Asivia felt embarrassed, but thanked the man for his help. It seems she really should be more careful. Then, Kavana put his arm around her shoulder and led her to the ship, so the girl wouldn't trip again. Asivia said she could walk alone, but the emperor insisted because she might twist her ankle. The green-haired man, who was already waiting for the newlyweds, noticed that this was quite a surprising sight. He then apologized for not showing up sooner and said his name was Lord Oslin Bainar, that he was the Minister of the Interior of the Ryodan Empire. Asivia knew who Oslin was, a man of humble origin, the son of an impoverished baron. He raised his family from its knees with the help of his ability to make money out of nothing. Life taught him to judge others not by their origin, but by their merits, and this allowed him to notice Quanag, who was just a common slave. As the empire's strategist, he led the revolutionary movement to victory, thus securing Quanag's position. His name also appeared mentioned in the archives, but now that Asivia saw him in person, he seemed like some kind of fictional character to her. Then Oslin asked if he could help the newlyweds in anything. Quanag said that Oslin is not only his close friend, but also the Minister of the Interior. Such acquaintances will definitely not be superfluous. So the heroine decided to introduce herself as Asibia Cadorl, but decided to correct herself, saying it would be more correct to call herself Asibia Ryodan. Quanag, upon hearing this, felt a little embarrassed, and Oslin, who felt extremely awkward in the company of the newlyweds, offered to board the ship. The emperor asked Asivia to give him her hand, but the girl kept refusing, saying she could get there alone. A small argument arose between the newlyweds, and Oslin and the rest of the pier workers awkwardly observed the whole affair. So, Asivia thought that perhaps calling the emperor by his name in front of low-class people was in bad taste. Suddenly, Quanag loudly declared that Asivia was his wife, so she was allowed to call him by his name. Oslin said that decorum should be maintained in all circumstances, but the emperor replied that this didn't sound very convincing, coming from someone who called him by his name at every opportunity. Asivia didn't know what to do. This whole discussion was already turning into a conflict. Thinking that way, Quanag calmed down a bit when he noticed that she was feeling unwell. He worried when the girl almost fell. Perhaps she is one of those people who only shows her kind side in private. So, the girl decided to intervene in the dispute between the two men. She said she didn't feel well and wanted to rest a little. Quanag was immediately struck by lightning. He said he should have noticed earlier that Zebia wasn't feeling well. He immediately approached the girl, took her in his arms, and told her he would take her to the cabin. Oslin watched the newlyweds bewilderedly. Soon the emperor took his bride to their cabin. He asked her if she was sure she was just feeling unwell, because the girl's face was red. Maybe she had a fever, but the girl assured him she was fine. Asibia thought all this was very ridiculous, but suddenly she noticed something that distracted her from these thoughts. It was a soft green dress that was on her bed. The girl immediately approached it, saying it was very beautiful. She liked this shade of green. Asivia thought to herself that no one before had given her such wonderful gifts. Then she said she would like to see the person who prepared this dress for her. Quanag looked away and said it was him. The girl looked at the emperor in surprise and then thanked him for such a wonderful gift, and she promised him that she would be careful with it. Quanag said that Asivia should rest now and that he had some matters to attend to, but he promised to return as soon as he finished with them. After all, they are husband and wife and should sleep in the same bed. So, Asibia realized that she hadn't taken that moment into account. It turns out that from now on, they will sleep in the same bed. The girl thought that, in general, this is logical, because Quanag married her for the sake of an heir, so this is inevitable. However, it seemed to her that it was too soon. She thought she would wait at least until they reached the empire and start performing feats, not wanting to delay his military duties any longer. Asivia didn't understand why there was such a hurry. Was she really that desirable to him? She needed to think better. It made no sense for Quanag to think she was attractive. Sooner or later, he will realize that she is infertile and will not be able to have a child. Meanwhile, Quanag kept looking persistently at the girl. Then he reached out and took her chin. He decided to tell Asivia this because he cares about her. But sleeping in the same bed doesn't mean a wedding night. Now she is not only the empress, but also his wife. Sleeping in different beds could have a negative effect on her. The man also assured her that he would not pressure her. Asivia looked away and said she would do everything possible to make the emperor happy. So Kwanna let her go, saying he would rather not settle anything on the ship at night. Besides, getting into bed with someone who is against it is terrible, so he will wait for the moment when Asivia is ready for their wedding night. The girl was very surprised. She was sure that the emperor was really waiting for an heir. The man smiled. This is their first night, and his wife is already in a hurry to strengthen the empire's position. He is lucky to have such a devoted woman. However, he was not in a hurry. If Asivia really wants to give him an heir, she must at least pretend to love her husband first. Kwanne said that although it is a political union, he hopes genuine love will flourish between them. The girl looked at her husband confused, not knowing what to answer him. Shortly after, Kwanne went to his office to handle some governmental affairs. He recalled Sevilla's words about the heirs. Kwanne realized that everything turned out much more complicated, but perhaps even better. It would make the day easier for both of them. Since she doesn't remember the past, they can start over from scratch. The man was distracted from his thoughts by Aslin, who abruptly burst into his office. He was extremely outraged, because he heard that the emperor was sending his people to protect Arkai's borders without consulting anyone. Fana said that the people of Arkai were left without a guardian. They must compensate for this loss. Then Aslin said that this political union is complete nonsense. Their people were better in everything. Nothing prevented them from taking over an entire nation, and the emperor didn't even need permission to extract minerals in their territory. He sacrificed the lives of loyal soldiers for the sake of a spoiled princess. Kvanna immediately became grim and ordered Aslin to watch his words. Azibia is not a spoiled princess at all. For her, Kvanna was willing to give everything and even more. Aslin wondered why the emperor suddenly became like this, and then Kwanna threw papers at him. He got up from the desk and told the man to get out of here. Meanwhile, something strange was happening in Asivia's cabin. The girl woke up in the middle of the night from a strange sensation. She didn't feel well. She assumed it was because her guardian powers were leaving her. The girl understood that she could not allow Kwanna to find out that she no longer had powers. Asivia got up to ask the servants to bring her medicine, but her vision was blurry, and her head was spinning. The girl somehow managed to reach the door. Seeing that someone was behind her, she asked them to bring her medicine. This man turned out to be Kvanna. He immediately asked why the girl needed medicine. Azibia immediately turned around and returned to the cabin, saying she was fine, just that her head hurt. However, it was obvious to the man that something was wrong. The girl was very pale, so he decided to call a doctor. Asivia suddenly felt a knot in her stomach, which was strange because she hadn't eaten anything. After a few moments, the girl realized what had happened and looked at the emperor fearfully. There was a large wet stain on his white shirt, right where Asivia's face had just been. Kwanna said nothing about it. He just asked again if he could call a doctor. However, the girl did not answer. She was trembling with fear and poor health. She extended a trembling hand towards the edge of the man's shirt, apologizing for what she had done. Azibia didn't know what to do. Everything started more or less okay, and now she also ruined his clothes. The girl was sure that the emperor was very angry and would now definitely reconsider their engagement. Suddenly, Azibia heard the ghost's voice again. It said the girl was making one mistake after another. She asked what his problem was. Was it really that hard to satisfy the emperor? Asivia has already lost her magic, the only thing Kwanna needed, and if she keeps failing, a worse fate awaits her. The heroine apologized again and said she would clean up immediately, but the emperor told her not to bother, that it was none of his business. Then he grabbed the edges of his shirt and lifted it up. The next moment, she was already without her outer clothing, and he said the problem was solved. He said he would just put on a clean shirt, as if nothing had happened, and that Azibia didn't need to blame herself for such nonsense. The heroine said she didn't want to bother Quannak, but he replied that he had nothing to be angry about. He is not so arrogant as to judge a dizzy person. Hearing this, the girl was surprised. Then Quannak reached out his hand to her forehead, saying that, apparently, this was her first time on the ship. He needed to create better conditions, but Azibia shouldn't let small things like that ruin her mood. Then, Quanna said that she reminded him of his days on the battlefield. Every day he was in a new battlefield. Then he met a man who begged him to join the ranks of the revolutionaries. He was a terrible idiot, and constantly said that he would serve Quanna until the end of his days. One day, they came across the corpse of a dead soldier. This guy's scream was heard throughout the area. Then the emperor asked Asivia who she thought the boy was, but the girl had no idea. It turned out to be Aslin. That day he screamed and cried because he couldn't do this anymore. Asivia couldn't believe it was really Aslan Vainar. Then Kwanna continued. He said that instead of apologizing, Aslan accused him of deliberately going down the road with the corpses. The heroine was surprised and said she couldn't believe it. Then she laughed and said she had no idea he was such a sissy. Kwanna looked away and said that after a couple of years, Aslan stopped being so whiny. He added that time has done its job, a couple more trips, and today's misunderstanding will be erased from Sebia's memory. It's like a drop in the bucket. The girl wondered if he thought the same about his terrible past, because they were just a couple of drops in the sea of his memories. If this is exactly the case, then it hurts her to realize how unfair life was to him. Asivia would like to know the real Kwanna better, not the cruel and heartless man rumored about. At that moment, a red-haired boy ran to the girl's cabin and knocked timidly. Kwanna said that he had finally arrived. After all, it turned out he had sent for a doctor. The emperor allowed the boy in and told him to do his job immediately. The doctor apologized, saying he wanted to make sure to take everything he needed, and that was why he arrived a little late. He said it would be an honor for him to help the empress. The guy introduced himself as Simon, the court physician. Asivia looked at him amazed. Could this timid young man really be the court physician of the Ryodan Empire? Simon, seeing the girl staring at him long and fixedly, asked if everything was all right. Asivia immediately smiled and greeted the doctor. She also introduced herself as Princess Arkai and the new Empress Ryodan, and also thanked the boy for arriving at such a late hour. Simon was a bit embarrassed and said he was always happy to help his beloved. Their conversation was interrupted by Kwanna. He looked grimmer than a cloud. He said that while Simon was relaxing, the princess was suffering, and now he was bothering. Asivia asked her husband to calm down because she already felt fine, so there was no need to pressure the doctor so much. But Kwanna insisted, saying that one oversight would have disastrous consequences. The emperor once again ordered the doctor to proceed, and Simon immediately rushed to Asivia. While examining her, the girl noticed that he was trembling. He must have been afraid of Kwanna. So the heroine decided to put her palm on his and ask him how old he was. Simon said he would turn 18 this year. Asivia said that he is almost the same age as her younger brother. The boy is very young and already serves as a court physician. He must be a master of his craft. And although Simon said he still had much to learn, the girl laughed and replied that she didn't believe it, that the emperor would not trust an inexperienced person. She smiled and asked Kwanna if her guess was correct. The emperor looked away and said that Simon was quick-witted. All he had to do was take a look to remember something. The man appointed him court physician in the hope that this skill would one day prove useful. Not everyone is capable of memorizing the entire human structure at such a young age. Simon said he was flattered. He doesn't have that many talents. However, he promised to do everything in his power to cure the empress. Asivia thanked him and added that it was nice to know that her health was not in danger when such a doctor was nearby. When Simon finished, Kwanna and Asivia were left alone. The man said that the doctor is a shy guy. He behaves very modestly when surrounded by unfamiliar people, but the emperor thought he could make a good impression. Asivia said that was fine. Seeing Kwanna's perplexed look, she said that she knew she would need to meet the emperor's inner circle, but she didn't understand what the problem was. So, Kwanna asked if she considered it an acquaintance that she took Simon's hand. The heroine immediately realized that the man was upset. This was to be expected. He must have wanted his wife to stay away from other men. Asivia decided to apologize, saying that Simon reminded her of her brother, who she couldn't just turn a blind eye to his concerns. But Kwanna said she shouldn't apologize, that he wasn't going to scold her. So the girl smiled and decided to explain why she took the doctor's hand. She remembered how the emperor hugged her in the carriage, and then showed her how a gentle touch could help in moments of emotion. However, in the future, she will try to be more careful with her actions. Kwanna did not reply, but handed something to Asivia and put it to her lips. He said it would help remove the bitter aftertaste of the medicine. Asivia realized they were candied raspberries, which she simply adored. The emperor said he had many more. The girl could eat as many as she wanted. The heroine said she didn't hold back, but Kwanna noticed she hadn't swallowed the candy he gave her yet. He said she was like a rabbit, timidly nibbling on a lettuce leaf. However, so much closeness confused them both, so Kwanna got up, saying that Simon's medicine would soon take effect. A little more, and Asivia would feel better. But it was already late. It was time for them to go to bed. The man went to the desk and said he still needed to look at some documents. He brought all the papers here so as not to go anywhere. The man could not leave Azebia alone until he knew she was fine. Soon the girl went to bed, and the emperor sat down at the table to continue working. The heroine thought he wasn't joking, that he really hadn't gone anywhere. Kwanna pays no attention to her lack of manners and worries about the girl and her health. She wondered if he really wanted to love her like a real wife. And if this marriage brings peace to the people, maybe Azebia can love him too. Suddenly, Dietrich's voice sounded in her head, saying that perhaps she wouldn't have even dreamed of it. Azebia was horrified, but then she thought about all this. It was true. She couldn't give Kwanna an heir. He would get rid of her as soon as he realized this. His generosity and kindness would turn into cruelty in an instant. Azebia decided that she didn't need to get carried away too much. She was here to protect Arkaya. Maybe she should let Kwanna realize that all this was for fun. Shortly after, the girl fell asleep and the emperor continued his work. After a while, morning came. The ship was still sailing on the sea towards its destination. When Azebia woke up, she realized that Kwanna was not in the room. Then she decided to leave the cabin. The maid said she shouldn't do this, that it was better for the empress to rest. However, Azebia assured that she felt much better after sleeping. This is her first trip on a ship. It would be a shame to sleep all day in the cabin. As soon as Azebia opened the cabin door, a pleasant coolness immediately flooded her. Then she saw the beautiful blue sea, which seemed boundless. This sight charmed the girl so much that she couldn't take her eyes off it. But suddenly someone called her from behind, wishing her good morning. These were the emperor's subjects. The girl thanked them for their hard work. She realized that last night, Oslin had the same expression on his face, everyone. And each of them was afraid of her. But this is not surprising, because to them she is just a stranger. Ryodan is a young empire. Quannak doesn't need Arkai's magic at all, but a wife from the noble circles of the empire who can help him gain support. And acquaintances, but instead of meeting the expectations of his entourage, he decided to marry a foreign princess from a ruined kingdom. Consequently, Azebia was feared, and perhaps even hated by his subjects. She had never encountered anything like this before, because in Arkai mages are treated with respect. But now, she was even afraid to think about what the Ryodan Empire had in store for her. She was distracted from her thoughts by someone's shout. Someone called Azebia again. Simon ran out onto the deck and said he had been looking for the Empress everywhere. Azebia hurried to assure him that everything was fine with her after last night. Her medicine worked perfectly. Then the doctor said it was cool today. If the girl stayed on the terrace for too long, she could catch a cold. Suddenly, Quannak's voice came from behind Simon. He said the court physician wouldn't get away with his carelessness. Then the emperor took Azebia in his arms, saying she wasn't in the cabin when he returned, and that it was now time to go back. Simon exhaled, realizing the emperor's threat had passed. Azebia said that Quannak's servants wouldn't like something like that being done to her. But the man said manners were no longer important. The girl insisted, because the emperor is the main role model for the nobility. Picking up and carrying a woman in one's arms is ugly. Then, Hwana leaned towards her face and said there was something else he should have mentioned earlier. He said this was the reason why he was so eager to take the throne. He wanted to change everything. He wanted to build a country where people felt free and were not limited by the chains of etiquette and hierarchy. Soon, Hwana took Azebia to her cabin, saying there was no need to worry about the opinions of his associates. His servants taught him to accept himself as he was, and those who dared to look down on him had long since left. Suddenly, the girl noticed several books on her bed. Hwana said he brought them here while she slept, that there wasn't much to do in the cabin anyway. Azebia was surprised that there were books here. The emperor replied that on sea voyages, you can't go anywhere without books. They brought them here from the shelves of the palace library. The girl said she loves reading. She always tries to do it when she has a minute, but lately she has a lot to do. So, Kavana invited her to read together. Azebia thought Ryodan is an amazing empire. These are very rare books that are closely followed. It is said that the palace has the largest library, apparently due to Quanna's love for reading. The more the girl got to know him, the more interesting he revealed himself to be. She always imagined him as a brave soldier, and not as someone sitting with his nose buried in a book. Azebia smiled. Quanna looked very cute when he was lost in thought. In a past life, reading was the girl's favorite pastime. There was no one to talk to in the palace. That's why she cured loneliness by reading the works of others. This allowed her to immerse herself in the author's thoughts. But now she knew what it was like to have a person nearby who could share an interest in books. It would be great if life in the empire was this calm. With these thoughts, Azebia fell asleep. After a while, Quanna woke her up and told her that the ship had reached the port. Very soon, they will step across the threshold of the palace. When Quanna and Azebia got into the carriage, the girl suggested that the man should prepare to appear well. After all, he returns to the empire with a princess from overseas. His entourage must have been waiting with great anticipation. Quanna replied that in a couple of days there will be a public address, and then they will all see. And if possible, the emperor would like to present Azebia after the official wedding ceremony in the capital. Because what happened in Arkai is just a formality. The girl looked at Quannak bewildered, because it didn't seem that way to her. He then explained that the official ceremony would consolidate Azebia's position as the emperor's consort. When the girl arrived at the palace, she was immediately greeted by Mariana, the head of the household. She said that her maids had created every condition for the empress's comfort. Azebia thanked her for such care. So, Marian offered to show the girl around the palace. This would help her feel comfortable. During the tour, Azebia thought that the entire palace was evidence of the wealth and prosperity of the empire. No wonder that in her past life Arkaya was defeated. They underestimated Kavana and studied the enemy too poorly. Suddenly, Azebia stopped. She looked out the window and said that one of the buildings looked a bit different. Marian said that this estate is an annex to the palace. Azebia thought, it looks exactly like the royal palace of Arkai. Then she said she would look at this building a bit later. Now she would rather finish examining the imperial palace. Marian said that the entire second-floor wing was reserved for the future children of the imperial family. And then she led the girl to the empress's bedroom. Azebia was amazed at how rich and spacious her future bedroom was. It seemed to her that this room was too luxurious for her. Then she went to the bed to touch the beautiful red sheets. Marian said she would check with the servants if everything was ready for tonight. Azebia looked at the woman bewildered. Marian explained that His Majesty and Madame would spend their first night in the imperial palace today. After a while, Quanna arrived at the bedroom and said that the room had changed a bit while she was working. Azebia explained that all the servants, including Marian, had worked hard to make it a memorable night. Now it was clear to the emperor why his wife was now wearing a nightgown. The girl was a little embarrassed, thinking that wearing this dark blue shirt was too much. Quanna looked away embarrassed and said that clothing suited her very well. Then he added that he promised her he wouldn't take the first step until she was ready. But there was no doubt that Azebia looked beautiful. Deciding not to continue this topic, he suggested the girl go to bed, as she must be tired. So Azebia decided to apologize, as she is not very versed in all these matters. Kavana turned to her and told her that he himself was not a professional and had never been intimate with anyone. Azebia was surprised because he is an emperor. Rulers must take care of procreation. Kavana sat on the edge of the bed and asked if the girl wanted a more experienced man. The heroine felt embarrassed by such a question. She said she wasn't serious, that it was a bit unexpected. However, the emperor said the problem wouldn't go away. Both didn't know what to do. Then he suggested they practice a little. He heard that they should first hold hands, lie next to each other, and then see how it goes. Azebia reached out her hand to him, but she was lost, she didn't know what to do. Then she said she would need a minute. She felt a little uncomfortable in her shirt. The girl went to another part of the room to change clothes, but Kavana said the shirt buttons were on the back. The man slowly approached her and offered help taking off her shirt. He gently touched her back and asked if Azebia minded. After a while, he unbuttoned all the buttons on the girl's back. Then, Kavana touched her hair and placed it over Azebia's shoulder. The girl, embarrassed, thanked him for his help. Soon, Azebia lay down on the bed and covered herself with a blanket. All this embarrassed her greatly. Juana was also lost in his thoughts. He would never have thought he would be unbuttoning instead of a maid. Then he decided to approach Azebia and invited her to practice again. But since she was so far away, he couldn't even take her hand. So the girl reached out her hand, and their palms closed. She asked him if he felt comfortable now, because suddenly they found themselves in the same bed. Before they slept in different cabins. Then the emperor, to Azebia's surprise, replied that during the journey he had been in the same cabin as her. While she slept, he spent the night in a chair nearby. At some point, he started using her cabin only to shower and change clothes. Then, he suddenly heard Azebia talking in her sleep. She often turned to her brother and told him she didn't want to do this. Juana realized that she had nightmares every night. Moreover, he promised the girl that he would be there until she fell asleep. Esivia smiled and said that the emperor was indeed a completely different person from what she had imagined. She admitted that before the wedding, she was a little afraid of him. She thought Juana was a dangerous person because he became emperor thanks to the revolution he himself organized. But now she realized this was not the case. Esivia simply feared that the emperor would not like her. Then Kavana placed his hand on her cheek and told her that he liked the girl very much, and that he regretted nothing, not even the wedding. And now, and in the future, Esivia is the person he needs most. The girl said she liked the man too, and soon started falling asleep. Before falling asleep, Esivia again heard the ghost's voice, which told her she shouldn't fall for this. After all, Kavana said he needed her strength, and that of her future children. He liked the sorceress Esivia, not her. In the morning, the girl woke up and saw a bouquet of red roses on the table. She noticed they weren't there yesterday. The bridesmaids must have prepared them. At that moment, Marian called Esivia. She was glad to know that the empress managed to sleep through the night without nightmares. Looking at the maid, Esivia thought that she had very polite speech, movements, and sure manners. However, she also treats her with more care than necessary. But the girl didn't have time to think about it and worry. Now she has a lot to do in the empire. Then she asked Marian to prepare a simple breakfast for her. She would like to go to the palace library. Marian accompanied the girl to the library, and as soon as Esivia entered, she was impressed by its beauty. In this place, books that were not even officially published were collected. The librarian said there are also collections of legends and stories that were previously only passed down orally. All books about magic are in a secret section of the library, but Esivia can visit it at any time, and the girl decided to go there right now. When she entered, she thought there might be a key to the guardian's powers. Suddenly, among the shelves, she saw a green book that immediately caught her eye. Esivia immediately took it and sat down at the table. The age of magic's heyday was hundreds of years ago, so she expected that finding information about it wouldn't be so easy. But she couldn't even imagine that she would immediately stumble upon this book. Its title was The Rise of Magic in the Northern Continent, the history of non-human races. It seems there are rumors that some races still use magic, which is why more information about guardians than about normal mages can be found. More than 300 years ago, an army of evil invaded the lands where people lived. They even threatened the forest deity and her silver forest. And then, a man from the Kataril clan heard the forest's call and came to the rescue. He swore to protect the silver forest until the end of time. His devotion and courage pleased the goddess Fakar, and she endowed the Kataril family with divine power. However, the fragile human body could not withstand the power of the gods, so the guardian of the silver forest will never be able to live a normal human life. Esivia already knew all this information before, but only one person, who dedicated herself entirely to serving the goddess and protecting the silver forest. She became an exception, the eternal friend of the forest elves, Yeneza Kataril. Overcoming human limitations, her son received the blessing of the forest elves. Hidden underground, the forest elves still, even hundreds of years later, miss Yeneza. Esivia thought, in history books, they only wrote about her that she was a guardian who awoke 300 years ago. But how could Yeneza give birth to a child? The girl also didn't understand why she was called the eternal friend of the forest elves. She thought she could learn more if she met the forest elves, but she didn't know where to find them. A voice distracted her from her thoughts. Someone called her. It was Quena. He asked why Esivia was still here. The emperor decided to take his wife for a walk in the garden, but he didn't like that she skipped meals. The court ladies were very upset about this, because the empress disappears from morning till night, without showing herself to anyone. So the girl decided to apologize for this. She said that while reading, she didn't notice how time passed. Quena's cheeks immediately turned red, and he asked the girl not to look at him with those eyes. Then he said he wasn't angry, but his words sounded rude, so he decided to apologize. He wasn't angry because Esivia spent time in the library. He was just worried that she was forgetting to take care of her health while being so weak. In fact, he hoped something like this would happen at least once. She loved reading, and he should have taken that into account. The couple moved too close, and then Kavana stepped away from the girl and moved forward. Esivia turned around perplexed and looked at the man, who opened the tall wrought iron gates and invited the girl inside. Behind the gates was a beautiful place, with a huge fountain and picturesque shrubs. Juana said he thought he should show Esivia the place to demonstrate the sincerity of his concern. The girl touched the flowers and noticed they were very pretty. She liked flowers very much, especially those with small buds. They come in different colors. Juana said he was glad the girl liked the place. However, when she goes out like this to enjoy her favorite things, she must remember to bring food with her. The emperor ordered more flowers to be planted around the palace, especially for Asivia. It would be great to be able to take a walk there someday. The girl noticed she had never seen this palace before. Did Juana decide to build it just for her, like this greenhouse? Asivia didn't want to misunderstand so much. But why did he keep taking care of her with such tenderness? Then she touched the flower, and again felt a strange sensation. For some reason, here she felt the tremor of her magic. Juana asked her if she was okay, to which the girl shrugged and said everything was fine, but that her gaze was fixed on that flower. She thought that after leaving Archaea, she couldn't use magic, so she could use her abilities to communicate with plants. While Juana wasn't looking, she decided she could talk to the plants for a while. As soon as Azibia touched the flower, a voice told her that she shouldn't have come here. She needed to flee from here as quickly as possible. The girl started looking frantically from side to side, not understanding what was happening. Quinala looked surprised and asked what happened. The voice kept sounding in Azebia's head. It said that if she didn't flee from here now, she would die. A week before this incident, on a sunny day, a meeting took place in the greenhouse between a man and a woman. The woman stated that no matter how much the man asked her, her answer would remain the same. The man chuckled and said that she could at least be a little kinder. Then the woman shouted that she had always been proud of her profession. The man chuckled and said that pride was a good word, but was her job more important than that of her own sister? The woman nervously clutched the hem of her dress. She didn't understand how the man knew about her sister. So he asked her to weigh everything carefully and think about it, because fulfilling his request was not that difficult. The woman only needs to inform him of everything the Empress does and says, especially since she will continue working in her court. And since the woman finally returned here, it meant she was still interested in his proposal. It turned out that this woman was Marian, the head of household in the imperial palace. Soon night fell on the empire. Mariana headed to one of the houses. Inside, there was a bed on which a girl lay. Marian apologized, promised to visit more often, but there is too much to do in the palace. But first she suggested that the girl, whose name was Edith, take some medicine. She was her younger sister and suffered from sclerosis. That man found out about this. It was unthinkable that Marian's only younger sister was ill with such a disgusting disease, and incurable, which meant he didn't need to worry about it at all. The man himself knew perfectly well what kind of illness that was. It was the curse of their empire, isolated like a fortress. If you don't constantly take potions containing magical powers, the entire body will turn to stone, and the person will die. And in a world where it is difficult to find mages, the prices of such medicines have skyrocketed. Such an incurable disease must cause many problems. The man said that by collaborating with them, Mariana could get a lot of money. They could give her as much money as she couldn't imagine. Marian asked who else she would have to collaborate with besides him. The man said he could only tell her this if she firmly accepted his proposal, so he asked her to think about it carefully. Marian didn't understand why he was asking her to do these things, and most importantly, why he needed this. Meanwhile, Oslin brought Quena the tax calculations for the western part of the empire for the first quarter. As he requested, he also made several proposals for tax system reform, for the emperor to familiarize himself with them. Quanak said that at this rate, the reform proposals would be ready for the next council meeting. Oslin pointed out that the discussion at the meeting this time would be more serious. Conservative-minded aristocrats will not allow tax reform to take place. They will defend the preservation of old customs. If they reject the reform plan, they will also disrupt the verification of documentation. They still believe that aristocrats should rule the people. They still cling to old beliefs. Juana pointed out that they still allowed someone like him to obtain the throne. Although this was not permission, but a capitulation, as they had to surrender shamefully then. They can betray at any moment. We must not forget how they are really determined. But whatever the case, if their means did not help sustain the empire, they would have shared the fate of the former emperor. Beheaded by Quena's sword, Oslin said that the emperor would not do such a thing. In any case, he is very powerful. Quena replied that he simply did not want to shed anyone's blood again, at least within the empire. Then he remembered Sevilla's words that she liked the man. And now, Juana wondered if she would say she liked him, and thought he was a hero if she knew what he had been through. At that moment, Ezebia was in the greenhouse. She wanted to meet Marian here and waited for her to come. Soon the maid appeared at the appointed place. Then the girl said she wanted to ask her something. She suggested that Marian go for a walk, as this conversation would be too long to stay still. As the women went for a walk, Ezebia said she was incredibly surprised when she first saw the greenhouse. The heroine was really very surprised. She did not expect to still be able to communicate with the plants, even though her power had disappeared outside the house. The image of that night, when the flower told her she would die if she didn't leave here, it flashed through her mind again. Quena immediately tensed, not understanding what was happening. But Ezebia only replied that she had simply done something wrong. However, thoughts invaded her. Would she really die if she didn't leave here? Then the voice told her that the woman close to her was dangerous. She constantly encountered strange people. With one of them, she was discussing how to harm Ezebia. The heroine couldn't believe it. Was it really about Marian? She then asked the plant to show her its memories so she could know what the maid was talking about. The plant said that Ezebia could observe its memories as much as she wanted, because they were on her side. All the events that happened in this greenhouse passed before the girl's eyes. She saw Marian communicating with a stranger, listened to their conversation, and now everything became clear to her. And now, being with the maid in the greenhouse, Ezebia decided to ask her if she liked flowers. Marian replied that they were beautiful, so she could say she liked them. They are very beautiful creatures, but it is very easy to lose them, and it is frightening. She said she loves her little sister more than any flower. She is 10 years younger than Mariana. Her parents died early, so she raised the girl herself. Since Marian became the empress's maid, her sister has been living alone outside the palace. The girl said that her sister could also become a maid and come to live here, but her health was very bad. She has suffered from sclerosis for a long time, and Marian is trying to get medicine for her. Suddenly, the maid realized she had said too much. She immediately apologized to Ezebia for this, but the girl said there was nothing wrong. The heroine was the first to offer to talk, so Marian has nothing to apologize for. They see each other every day, but Ezebia didn't even try to get to know her better. The girl said that from now on, Marian would be her closest friend. That's why she suggested talking. She wanted to try to improve their relationship, even if it was too late for that. Ezebia thought that Marian was so distant towards her, only because in her eyes, she was a strange outsider who suddenly became her lover. But by trying to build a relationship with her and talk a little, they might become close friends. So she wouldn't be so distant if Ezebia had tried to do this from the beginning. The heroine swore that she would no longer live as before. But the bad habit of running away from people without trying to get to know them better persisted. Now Ezebia must change that. She is no longer a princess who died like a pathetic pawn in a large peace game. She has become an empress who has a huge number of people under her jurisdiction. Then she said that Marian shouldn't worry, she would try to find some way out. And although the maid said that Her Majesty shouldn't worry about such trivialities, Ezebia said that she was her person. The girl firmly decided that she would not leave now. She must try to do everything in her power. After a while, Ezebia arrived at the emperor's office, and Oslin was also there. The girl said she needed to ask Quanak for something. Before this, she clarified if she was interfering in important matters. Oslin meant they were discussing a reform, but Quena immediately dismissed it and said she was completely free. He said he was about to go see his wife. Then Ezebia asked if the emperor would like to have dinner together today. The man blushed a little at such an unexpected proposal, but immediately agreed. Soon, a whole table of food was prepared for the couple. Ezebia asked her husband if he was surprised that she had invited him so suddenly to dine together. This was a very unexpected act. She thought Juana would refuse. However, the man said that, on the contrary, he was pleasantly surprised by such an offer. Sebia's cheeks immediately turned red when she said that her request had definitely caused a lot of trouble for the palace cooks. Apparently, they didn't understand that it would only be two of them and prepared a whole table of food. Juana asked why she was so worried, because everything remained the same. The girl felt ashamed. She realized that she almost always dined in the library. Kayvana sighed and wondered what he should do with his empress. After a while, he said it was very good that they had dinner together. Otherwise, he would never have known how little Ezebia ate. The girl thought about the fact that she still had a lot to study, but Kayvana pulled her out of her thoughts and suggested that in the future, they should have dinner together. The heroine wanted to object, saying that the emperor already had a lot to do, but the man said that he was worried about her health and her eternal weakness. Then he handed her a piece of raspberry cake, because the girl loved raspberries. When Asivia started eating the cake, Juana decided to ask what was wrong. He understood that she hadn't just asked him to take time while he was busy. It seemed to him that the girl wanted to tell him something. Then Asivia said she had heard something from her maid. Marian was in a difficult situation. Juana knew her because he personally brought Marian to the palace. She studied for a long time to become an exemplary maid. She was distinguished by her manners and neatness, so the emperor immediately appointed her a maid in the palace. She periodically left the palace, so Juana suspected she had some problems, although he didn't know exactly what they were. Multiple sclerosis is a terrible disease, and under such conditions, it is obviously difficult for her to concentrate on work. So, Asibia asked if they could place Marian's sister in the palace. It would be better if she were close to her, and it would be easier for her to take care of her. Vanna thought about it. The court doctors were about to study sclerosis in more detail. Furthermore, the palace conditions and equipment are better than in other hospitals. And since Asivia's palace is nearby, Marian won't have to travel far to reach her sister. Asivia couldn't believe what she heard. Would the emperor really allow this? The man smiled and said there was nothing in this empire that couldn't be done at the empress's request. The girl looked at him surprised. She couldn't even imagine that Vanna would meet her halfway. Noticing the girl's gaze, the man asked if everything was all right. Asivia laughed and thanked the man for his help. If it hadn't been for him, it's unknown what would have happened to Marian and her sister. Juana said he only fulfilled her request. In fact, it is Asivia who should be thanked, not him. The girl felt ashamed. She insisted that all this was possible only thanks to Quanak's generosity, but they should have agreed that both were great. The man smiled, agreeing with this position. Asivia thought she was very worried when the emperor took her hand. She needed to finish eating quickly and get up from the table. Suddenly, Quana said there was something on her face. He brought his hand to her cheek and removed a piece of raspberry cake. The girl thanked him for his help, but was suddenly surprised, thinking she couldn't take her eyes off the man. Quana leaned over Asivia, looking into her eyes, and with every moment sank closer to her lips. A spark flashed between the spouses, but it was destined to be extinguished immediately when Aslan burst into the room. He said he had brought the documents the emperor spoke about. Quana immediately separated from Asivia and turned around. His face was red. Aslan immediately realized he had arrived at the wrong moment. When the emperor calmed down a bit, he asked what kind of documents were there. Asivia thought, if she wasn't mistaken, then Quana just wanted to kiss her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the emperor's voice. He said they had a great time, but now it was time to say goodbye for a while. And although the girl didn't show it, she was thinking to herself what she should do. For some time now, she had felt strange around Quana. Soon Asivia called Marian to tell her the good news. Her sister will be able to receive treatment in the palace hospital. Asivia has already talked about this with His Majesty. A place is already being prepared in the hospital, so Marian can bring her here soon. The maid said that, according to the rules, only aristocrats and officials can visit all palace institutions, and that they are common commoners. Asivia didn't understand why she was saying that, and then Marian explained that she was from a common family. And common, she was very lucky when His Majesty gave her the opportunity to work in the palace. Because in another country, a commoner like her would not have been allowed to even touch the empress's dress. Then Asibia said this is the riot in empire. Here people are judged by their skills and not by their origin. Therefore, Marian deserves that attitude. Especially because how can there be a good empress who cannot help her loved ones because she is obsessed with some kind of rules? The heroine said that was her wish. She decided not to ignore Marian's problems and would like her to accept it. The maid didn't know what to answer. Everything seemed so unusual. She remembered all the days she spent by Edith's bed, observing no improvement in her condition. Marian burst into tears. She regretted having treated the empress terribly there. The girl fell to her knees. She decided to tell that some people were trying to drag her into their machinations against Asibia. They promised Marian a cure for sclerosis if she gave them information about the empress. The maid asked to be punished for the fact that she, at least for a moment, thought about accepting this. Asibia approached her and told her that she only wanted to help her sister. On the contrary, she deserved praise for not accepting this even in such a situation. Asibia helped the maid get up and asked her to tell her who offered her that deal. Marian wiped away her tears and said that this man was a famous and honored aristocrat of the empire. His name was Baron Edwin. Ezebia said she had never heard that name before and wondered why he wanted information about her. Marion didn't know the answer to this question, but said he was a very cunning man. Due to disrespect towards the former emperor, he hid for fear of retaliation. He supported the revolution to change and get out of his situation. He was even called a co-founder of the empire. Ezebia understood that this man disagreed with the very idea of the revolution, but for the sake of his own well-being, he still supported it. Even the one who contributed the most to the revolution, Baron Aslan Bainar, refused the title. Other revolutionaries, like Baron Edwin, did not receive a high title. The emperor only gave him a large plot of land. Baron Edwin lost even this, so he now works as a minor official in the imperial palace. Ezebia thought, firstly, that during the revolution, the upper class should have lost their privileged position, which is why those who were previously part of the upper class now feel rejected. However, she wondered why he should follow her now, when everything is calm in politics. Then Marion asked her to be very careful. Baron Edwin always mentioned some kind of partners, which means that more than one or two people are involved in this matter. Then the heroine asked if Marion knew where the property that Baron Edwin received as a reward was located. The maid replied that it was located on the northeastern border of the empire. It is close to the border settlements and borders the kingdom of Archai, Ezebia thought. It turns out that he owns land on the border with Archaea. A name immediately came to her head of someone who might be involved in the matter with Baron Edwin. She immediately remembered the communication crystal that Dietrich had given her before leaving. Now the heroine understands that there is only one person who will be interested in any movement in this empire. Her older brother didn't believe her and tried to monitor her through others. Noticing that the empress had become sad, Marion asked if everything was all right. Ezebia smiled vaguely and thanked the maid for telling her everything. Then Marion asked to be allowed to contact Baron Edwin again. She knew that Ezebia would not ignore his actions, but if they found out, they would never discover who else was behind it. However, it is dangerous for the empress to do anything right now, so Marion offered to become a double agent. She will gain the Baron's trust by pretending to accept his proposal, but she will side with the empress. Ezebia hesitated because Marion might suffer, but the girl assured her that there was nothing wrong, because the empress saved her sister's life, and now she is ready to dedicate her life to her mistress. Marion knelt down and asked to be allowed to do this. Although Ezebia didn't like all of this, she still agreed after seeing the strong determination on the maid's face. She thanked Marion for everything she does for her. When night fell, Ezebia decided to take a walk in the garden. She arrived at a flower bed and sat down next to it. An image flashed through her mind of Marion, saying she was going to dedicate her life to her. At that moment, someone approached Ezebia from behind. It was Kavana. He asked what the girl was thinking about. Ezebia said that wherever she goes here, there are only beautiful flowers throughout the empire. Usually, flowers do not bloom for so long, but the gardener took very good care of them. And now that the girl mentioned it, Juana also noticed it. Then the heroine said she told Marion that the emperor had allowed her sister to be brought to the palace. She was very happy about this. Now she could help her sister. She said that then the maid took her hand so tightly and squeezed it with all her might. As strange as it was, she said she wanted to be on her side, but Ezebia hadn't done anything for her and wasn't sure if she was worthy of that kind of trust. The heroine immediately apologized, saying she was overthinking and shouldn't have said that. Then Kavana said he walks this path to his office and back almost every day. But today, he noticed these flowers for the first time. And if it weren't for Ezebia, he could have lived forever and not known what work the gardener put into them. The same goes for Marion. Juana only suspected her situation, but it wouldn't have even occurred to her to ask what was wrong. Paying attention to others and taking care of them is also work. And Juana was happy that such a girl became their empress. She could take responsibility for the empire. The man thanked Ezebia for becoming the empress of this empire. Then he bowed and tenderly kissed her palm. And although Ezebia was happy, every time Juana treated her like this, she remembered that he was hiding the secret of the guardians from her and the agreement with her brother. And as long as the heroine hides these two facts, she will never be able to become a true empress. But at least she wants to try, even if this relationship isn't real. As Juana said, Ezebia must become the person who can take charge of the empire. When the girl was alone, she took the communication crystal and almost immediately heard Dietrich's voice. The girl said quietly that they hadn't communicated for a long time. Dietrich said she hadn't been in contact for so long that he started to worry the girl might have died. But it seemed to him that she was still trying to ingratiate herself with the emperor. Then he asked her how she was living in the empire. Ezebia replied that not everything was as bad as he might think. The heroine thought to herself that Marion is now acting as a double agent. This would allow her to quickly obtain information about those who are truly against her. Ezebia needs to check if her brother is behind all this, so she needs to be as kind to him as possible. That's why she said the emperor is surprisingly prone to suspicion, which is why she hasn't managed to win him over yet. On top of that, Dietrich said he heard that Quanah was taking good care of her sister. Ezebia got up from her chair and asked what he meant. Dietrich smiled and said he wouldn't have sent his only sister alone to another person's empire. From the beginning, he sent his spy to the palace to watch her. So Ezebia thought maybe her brother was behind Baron Edwin. She said that reassured her, but she decided to ask who that spy was because she could trust the person who was already on her side. However, Dietrich said she didn't need to know that she should simply do as he told her. After all, if a girl like Ezebia starts interfering in politics, it will only disappoint her. But if she really wants to help, then Dietrich had information that discussions about a new tax reform were not fading in the empire. The reform plan is very radical, and the surprising thing is that conservative-minded aristocrats are reacting calmly to this. So Dietrich asked his sister to find out what tricks the emperor was using to win them over. If they want to destroy the empire, they must understand what the current relationship is between the emperor and the aristocracy. Ezebia said that many conservative aristocrats were the backbone of the revolutionary movement. However, Dietrich said she was getting ahead of herself if she really cared. That instead of worrying about that, it would be better if she found out Quanah's weaknesses instead of having a sweet conversation with him in bed. However, whatever the case, he hoped that Ezebia was still on Arkai's side. The man asked his sister to contact him more often. Then he said goodbye to Ezebia, calling her his beloved sister. As soon as the connection was lost, Dietrich jumped up from his chair and cursed out loud. He knew that Ezebia was pretending not to know anything, and her words that she was worried about Arkai's fate were a lie. She simply didn't want to lose the world that made her a heroine, which means this humiliating marriage suits her quite well. Dietrich was furious. If Ezebia truly cared about her country, then she must fight to the end. Both prayed for the downfall of their country. Dietrich wondered if Ezebia would never know what he had done to protect the country when he became regent for his sick father, who had lost both his mother and control of the kingdom. He was only 14 years old. No aristocrat wanted to sincerely obey the young prince, who took the place of the sick king. Seeing his sister's tears every day, Dietrich realized that he would protect his family and his country, even if he had to dedicate his entire life to it. He made this decision and accepted the fact that he would have to separate from his sister. After a while, he accidentally learned that Ezebia had awakened as a guardian. Everyone said this was proof that Arkaya was still blessed with the Silver Forest. However, there was a problem because the first Prince Dietrich is not a guardian. The aristocrats decided that Ezebia should inherit the throne and not the crown prince, because that was the will of heaven. Then he remembered the day his sister woke up after waking up, the moment she pushed him away. Ezebia said she hadn't fully recovered yet and hoped her brother would understand. Dietrich said it would indeed take a long time to get back to normal. And now, 10 years later, Dietrich thought that Ezebia could not betray him. She became a guardian, but still did nothing for Arkya. All her minor abilities to use magical powers only isolated Arkya. These fools don't even realize it, but they promote her as the true heir to the throne. And everything is just ugly. At that moment, a man in a black cape and hood entered Dietrich's office. He said that the time would soon come when one man would independently deprive the uprooted king of his head. Then Dietrich could become ruler of an entire continent. The man agreed. He wouldn't have to wait long. Arkya needed to be rebuilt from the ground up so that it could prosper. Even if Dietrich didn't become the guardian, he could still make Arkya the leading state on the entire continent. And he was determined to prove it, no matter the cost. The next day, Ezebia told Marion that she wanted to meet with members of parliament. She wanted to know among whom the power in the empire was distributed. The maid said that there are only 20 people in parliament. 10 of them are aristocrats, and the other 10 are commoners. To pass a new law, the consent of 13 or more people is required. Ezebia thought that the ratio of aristocrats to commoners in parliament is 50 to 50. And even during the passing of the law, political struggle cannot be avoided. Consequently, it is the parliamentarians who know the situation of the empire better than anyone. Dietrich already knows about the preparation of the tax reform, and Baron Edwin is a humble official. It shouldn't be easy for him to get information about a reform that hasn't even been adopted yet. This means that one of the aristocrats in parliament is connected to Dietrich. Ezebia then said she would like to meet some of the parliamentarians, and she wondered if this could be seen as a noisy political gesture. Marion said that some ladies from noble families attend parliament sessions, after which they have tea. If Ezebia held a tea party and invited noble ladies, it would look like a normal social activity. The heroine realized that through these women, she might also learn something useful, and she thanked Marion for the great idea. The maid said that in a few days, everything would be ready for tea. She asked the empress where she would like to spend it. Ezebia said she didn't know, but since it was a tea party, it had to be somewhere very beautiful. Soon the noble ladies arrived at the empress's palace. Marion said she was waiting for them inside. The girls noticed that this place was extremely beautiful. There were many rumors about a princess from a small kingdom, and that this was an arranged marriage. But they didn't expect the emperor to care so much about his wife. At that moment, Ezebia was observing the guests from the balcony. She smiled at them, inviting them to celebrate their first meeting. On the occasion of the parliamentary meeting, ladies from the noblest aristocratic families gathered, and among them was the most prestigious, Duchess Evelyn Haley. It was a red-haired young woman who said that thanks to the emperor's care, Ezebia was probably comfortable in her palace. The heroine knew about the Haley dukedom. This family sided with the emperor, and many empresses came from this family during the Pernan dynasty. But as soon as the revolution broke out, this family was the first of the aristocratic families to side. Concwana, all the gathered noble ladies come from wise families that survived the storm of the revolution. The opinion they formed of Ezebed as empress would greatly influence their political activities in the future. However, a green-haired girl at the table annoyed her. According to Marion, that lady is Oslin's sister, Marquise Rimbella Brooks. It's no wonder the heroine thought she looked familiar. Then Ezebed approached her and asked if she liked the aroma of her tea. Rimbella became embarrassed, and stuttering, replied that it was the first time she had seen such tea leaves. Her family also grows tea. The other girl smiled and said that the marquise was still the same in front of the empress. Evelyn apologized to Rimbella for her rudeness because she is very shy. She might seem clumsy. The girl looked down sadly, and the other girls started whispering about her. They said everyone knew that the Marquis of Brooks' estate was located in very cold regions. Nothing grew there except cold-resistant trees, and there had never been tea there. So the girls turned to Ezebia and told her they had heard that her homeland was also quite cold. Evelyn said it is so cold in the north of the empire that the harvest there is very poor. It must be difficult for families like the Brooks family to live there. She asked what things were like in the empress's homeland. It was probably very different from the north of the empire. Ezebia understood that all this was a test. They deliberately put Rimbella from a young aristocratic family in an uncomfortable position, and they wanted to see which side the empress would take. Some of their families are related to Dietrich. Ezebia knew what needed to be done to implement her plans, but would that action be the right thing to do? As much as she wanted to use her skills now, she really couldn't do it right now. So, Ezebia remembered that night in the greenhouse when Quanah kissed her hand. And then she promised herself to try. Gathering her strength, the heroine stated that there is a cold climate in the north, and harsh all year round. So, Evelyn asked if it mattered whether people lived in the north or the south. Ezebia smiled and said she was very happy that the noble ladies were interested in the northern lands, thus showing concern for them. They understand how difficult life is for northern families during winter. This means they know very well how to manage their own lands. Evelyn's face immediately darkened, and she asked what Ezebia meant, if she was really asking if they could govern their own lands. The heroine replied affirmatively, because recently there was a rather harsh winter, and she would be interested to know how the ladies dealt with it. One of the girls said that, unlike the north, winters in the south of the empire are not so harsh because they are blessed by the goddess. Ezebia said that, as far as she knows, there was very little rain last autumn. They say that's why there was a food shortage in the empire. There are records that, in connection with this, grain was released from the imperial palace storehouse. Even with the goddess's blessing, winter is still a difficult time of year for people. People face severe cold and famine, not only in the north, but also in the south. This means that they, too, must know how to cope with even the cruelest circumstances. And sad, so Ezebia asked if they could now answer her question, but the ladies fell silent. She then turned to Rimbella to tell her how her family's winter had gone. The girl felt very embarrassed when the Empress turned to her, but she still decided to answer the question. She was ashamed to talk about it, but winter is difficult where they live. Because of this, His Majesty assigns them grain every year as support. Every year they gather provisions to distribute them in especially difficult times. Farmers collect firewood and send it to the palace. This way, farmers who cannot work in winter can still receive a daily wage to have the means to buy food fairly and maintain their dignity. Ezebia said it was good that they were finding work for the farmers under such conditions. Thanks to the Marquis and Marquis Brooks, the people who rented land from them were able to experience a rather warm winter and comfortable, unlike the less fortunate. Evelyn jumped up from her seat and asked what answer the Empress expected from them. She said she just wanted to ask her how she spent the winter. So, Ezebia said that before their visit, she reviewed all the annual financial reports of the empire. Last winter, Duke Haley and Count Godu spared no expense in buying expensive iron ore from abroad. There are records of its importation into the territory of the empire. The Brooks family spent their money buying food and clothes for the farmers. But what did they end up doing with that ore that could require so much iron? Then Evelyn shouted. She couldn't believe the Empress was accusing them that their family was planning an uprising. Countess Godu entered the conversation and said that they were indeed buying iron ore. But the Empress misunderstood everything. They wanted to buy the imperial mine, which would soon go up for auction. Then Ezebia understood everything. They wanted to buy the mine. The aristocrats agreed to the adoption of a tax reform on the condition that the imperial mine would be auctioned. This is the reason for the tacit consent of the conservative aristocrats. Then Evelyn shouted. She said that they were also contributing to the creation of this empire. She put her life into the welfare of this country, but in return, she only received a cold scorn, so she couldn't let it go like that. Then Evelyn asked to be allowed to leave. A week has passed since that tea party. During all this time, Ezebia did not receive a letter from a single lady, apparently because it left a terrible impression on them. The girl was distracted from her thoughts when someone knocked on the door. In the end, it turned out to be Baron Vaynar. He needed to tell the Empress something. Oslin said his sister asked for a letter and a small bag to be delivered to Ezebia. And the man also heard that the Empress showed concern for his sister. He said that when Rimbella was 10, she suffered a serious illness, after which she started stuttering. So during all this time, she almost never left her estate. And that day, she visited the palace for the first time. The first thing she did was ask Oslin to deliver a letter to the Empress. And in the bag was tea that only grows on the estate of the Marquis of Brooks. The tea leaves look small, but thanks to their incredible resilience, this plant does not die. And it continues to grow even in the snow, which gives it a unique aroma. This tea is considered very valuable, so even Oslin usually doesn't receive it as a gift. Apparently, Rimbella really wanted to thank Ezebia for her kindness. Perhaps she would have been a more worthy maid, because she is an intelligent girl who knows much more than her brother Oslin. The man decided to thank Ezebia for her kindness towards him and his sister. He will never forget it. Ezebia shook his hand and said that Baron Vaynar is a responsible person to whom the affairs of the empire can be entrusted. The girl thought about it. Kavanna told the truth. Even without magic, she could help someone. She told Oslin that his sister's gift was truly valuable. Soon Ezebia decided to have tea with Kavanna. She said that her meeting with the noble ladies was a success. She managed to become friends with Marquise Brooks and her brother Oslin. He was very kind to her. The emperor asked why the girl called him by his first name, because before she addressed him by his surname. Then, Ezebia said that Oslin declared that he was a simple vassal, and that the Empress should address him by his name, and not by his title. Ezebia laughed. She thought Oslin didn't like him. Kavanna noticed that she looked very pleased. The girl said her joy knew no bounds. Kavanna wanted her to get along with his entourage, and she succeeded. However, the man said that at times, she manages to worry him. Ezebia didn't understand what he was talking about, but the man said it didn't matter. He asked the girl to let him know if he was taking up too much of her time, and before Sevia could answer, he asked if that girl would come today. The heroine said that Edith, Marian's sister, would indeed come today. Meanwhile, the girl had already arrived at the palace gates. Sevia and Marian went out to meet her. The girl immediately curtsied when she saw the empress. Then she looked up and saw her older sister. She immediately ran to hug her. Marian reported that Edith was much better thanks to Her Majesty's medicine. Ezebia said that was wonderful news, which meant she would recover very soon. But in the meantime, the court doctors would take care of her. The heroine held out her hand to the girl. Her heart broke at the mere thought that she had to suffer so much. Edith squeezed the empress's hand. At that moment, I felt a strange sensation. She couldn't understand what was happening. Her face was distorted with horror. Simon distracted her from this state. He ran to the palace gates and apologized for being late again. Ezebia said everything was fine. They themselves had just arrived, and she thought that strange sensation was just an attack of dizziness. Then she introduced Edith, Marian's sister, to Simon. The young doctor looked at the girl confusedly and then greeted her timidly. After that, he quickly turned around and said they needed to go see the hospital. Ezebia smiled awkwardly. She thought they would quickly become friends due to their age, but it seemed it would take some time. Simon said that the court hospital is at the disposal of the imperial family and her entourage, so there are not many rooms here. Here they concentrated all possible resources on the study of pathologies and drugs. They were researching multiple sclerosis in this room. They didn't have time to clean, so Simon asked for forgiveness for the mess. Ezebia said it was immediately clear that her doctors were not idle, and that she was proud of them. She picked up some papers. Simon said they were research materials. The Gilera Trade Guild is the sole manufacturer and distributor of drugs for sclerosis. They have almost total control over prices. The Empire's doctors tried to create their own formulas to counteract them. However, upon studying the ingredients of the drug, they discovered components they did not expect. Most likely, magic was involved, so the investigation reached a dead end. Since none of them understand magic, they are currently planning to develop a cure that does not depend on magic. It was then that Ezebia expressed her desire to help. She said that she and Simon would be excellent accomplices in this matter. As soon as Ezebia touched his hand, the guy immediately shouted and dropped all his papers. She knew that this was why the emperor would get angry again, and she didn't want that at all. That night, when Ezebia and Kwana were alone, she told him of her intention to work with Simon on a cure. The girl understood that her magic had weakened noticeably after leaving Archaea, but creating a medicine shouldn't require much effort. This was an ideal opportunity to strengthen her position as empress. Ezebia wanted to help by doing what she was good at, and trusted that Kwanala would support her. Then she asked him what he thought of her plan. However, judging by the man's face, he was not happy. The emperor wearily closed his eyes and said he was against such a decision. He was sure that Ezebia had her reasons, but this time he would have to refuse her. The girl did not understand why he made that decision, because she and Simon were willing to dedicate themselves completely to the research. They would help the victims. Juana said that since Sevilla brought up the topic of the cure for multiple sclerosis, she must have heard about the Giller Trade Guild. Giller is the most powerful merchant guild on the continent. Most trade, including trade with non-human races, occurs through them. Even Kwenahu does not know how great their power is. It is not wise to make enemies of those who control the flow of gold on the continent. Besides, the cure for multiple sclerosis is their main product. They will not tolerate competitors. Ezebia affirmed that she knew the risks, but she could not just sit and watch people die in agony, nor could she turn a blind eye to it. Juana said that the court doctors are already halfway to solving this problem. The girl should not worry. Then, the heroine jumped up from her chair. She thought the emperor was supporting her. It seemed to her that he was happy to see her in Ryodan. He claimed she was a natural empress. The man replied that this was irrelevant. He wanted Ezebia to live in abundance. But why should she risk her life when she could rule safely from the palace? Ezebia raised her voice, saying she did not want to be locked up in a dollhouse, drinking tea quietly and eating sweets like a spoiled little princess. She shouted, saying she hadn't come here to be a doll. After a few moments, she realized she had said too much and hurried to apologize. Her hands were trembling. Ezebia realized she had made a mistake again. She had violated boundaries by raising her voice to the emperor. She forgot her place because here she is nobody. Ezebia allowed her pride to blind her only because Kwenala treated her well. Then she lowered her head guiltily and asked for forgiveness, saying she had no intention of challenging his authority. Kavana replied that the girl didn't understand everything and that he didn't want to scare her. The man sat Ezebia on the bed and told her that he should be the one to apologize, because he didn't know it was so important to her. The heroine looked at her husband's face, and he was clearly not angry. He looked very scared. She asked what was bothering Kwanek so much. The man let out that he was afraid. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to protect the person he loved again. This thought frightened him, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. The man knelt in front of Asivia and pressed his lips against her hand. He begs to be allowed to protect her. Asivia thought. She didn't understand what kind of beloved person he was talking about. Then she said that Kavana is very worried about this. If the past weighs on him, then he can share his burden with her. Suddenly, the emperor stood up and grabbed her head. He said they should talk later. Quena headed towards the door, despite the girl's pleas to stay. Asivia just looked at him surprised. That night, the emperor did not return. The girl thought she had lost someone dear, but who exactly? At that moment, Marian entered the bedroom. She wished the empress good morning. This time, the girl woke up early. The maid said she was going to put new flowers in the vase. So, Asivia decided to ask her if she was arranging flowers. Marian replied that His Majesty, the emperor personally, chooses the flowers for Asivia. They are delivered to the maid every morning, and she brings them to the empress's bedroom. Asivia couldn't believe it. Were all these flowers really from Quena? She remembered their conversation in the greenhouse, when the girl told her about her favorite flowers. And that morning, those particular flowers were in her vase. Asivia took a flower in her hands and burst into tears. Juana is not a terrible person. There is no doubt about that. But she felt terrible for deceiving him. The next day, Asivia went to the greenhouse. The day before, Marian had told her that the weather was wonderful today, and that the empress could take a walk in the garden until sunset. The heroine thought she made Marian worry in vain. However, she understood that she shouldn't stay here. All these flowers made her think about all sorts of foolishness. Suddenly, behind the bushes, Asivia heard a strange sound. She parted the thick bushes, and behind them saw a young man with white hair and a blindfold on his face. He was sleeping. The girl, not understanding, looked at the stranger. She didn't know who he was. The young man was dumbfounded, and Asivia thought about the fact that she hadn't seen this man in the palace yet. The man was wearing a military uniform, and the girl didn't understand how he had ended up there. So she decided to call the guards just in case. At that moment, the man got up from his seat and looked sadly at the heroine. Asivia looked at the stranger confusedly. The next moment, the man shouted and called for the guards' help. After a while, he realized that the new empress was standing in front of him. The man laughed and said he should have recognized her sooner. He apologized for his rudeness. He must have fainted. The girl at that moment wondered what this man was doing here. Asivia asked his name and rank, but the man smiled and said he was not in the military at all. He said his name was Yaxer, and that it was an honor for him to introduce himself to the empress. Asivia looked at the boy in shock. Could it be the same Yaxer? The man was surprised that the empress knew him. Asivia knew this man firsthand. If Aslin was Quenaha's left hand, then Yaxer was the right. Before being a slave like an emperor, thanks to his military skills, he quickly rose through the ranks and became the commander of the imperial army. So the girl told him that he lied to her, that he was the commander of the imperial army. The man was surprised that she even knew this. However, he added that he no longer serves in the army. He got tired and resigned. Jaxer said that his handsome face had no place on the battlefield, and now he is free as a bird. Moreover, he was no longer subject to the demands of his beloved emperor, and he would not want his work to lead him to an untimely grave. Asivia said that the emperor is quite cruel when it comes to work, but he is the kindest man she has ever met. Jaxer said that this description was different from the emperor he knew. Then he told the girl that she could speak of him as he really was. He assured her that there was no need to hide her true feelings, and asked if their marriage union was not a humiliation for Arkai. These words touched the heroine in the heart. I didn't know what to answer. Jaxer said that the emperor is known for his bad temper. He causes fear in everyone around him. The man believed the empress knew it firsthand. Asivia screamed. She didn't understand how Jaxer could speak of him like that. Isn't he a close friend of His Majesty? The man chuckled and asked if Quena really made a big deal out of himself in front of her, or if he simply asked her to remain silent. He added that he was only worried about the empress, because His Majesty wasn't the most pleasant person. Asivia said the man was crossing the line. She would not allow him to insult him, her husband. In his presence, she ordered Yaxer to immediately stop speaking of unfounded accusations. The man chuckled when he heard this. He said he had known the emperor since childhood, but the empress didn't really know him yet. However, Ezebia stood her ground. She said she couldn't have asked for a better husband. Juana was kind and respectful. She said she respected and loved the emperor. Jaxer said it was very moving to see the empress completely satisfied with her married life. Ezebia said she was warning him for the last time. However, at that moment, Juana entered the greenhouse. The girl turned around and looked at her husband with fear. She immediately realized he had heard the whole conversation. She asked fearfully how long the man had been there. Quena looked away. His cheeks turned a little red. He said he had been informed that Jaxer was here, so he came here just in case. The man chuckled and asked if meeting the empress had really scared him that much. Then he said his work was done. He wished the emperor a good day and quickly left the room before the empress could say anything to him. The girl was very embarrassed. She wouldn't like to stay alone with her husband, but Quinath said they needed to talk about something. A slight embarrassment showed on the man's face. He asked if the girl had a moment to be alone with him. Meanwhile, night fell. The man asked his wife if she slept well. The girl immediately became sad and said she didn't sleep well. She couldn't sleep well after what happened. Ezebia was upset because the man never found peace again that night. The heroine feared that he didn't want to see her. Kavana was surprised and said it was his fault, not hers. Then he brought her hand to his lips and told her he never intended to deprive her of her freedom or threaten her. However, he knew he couldn't do anything if the girl hated him. Despite being fully aware of what he had done, he felt powerless. So, he decided the only option was to simply run away like a coward. The girl said she had no reason to hate the emperor. She admitted she was afraid of his reaction, but undoubtedly understood that he was only trying to protect her. Ezebia said she trusted Quena with all her heart. She also said she forgot to thank him for the flowers brought to her in the morning. They were beautiful. The man said they were just nonsense, but for the girl they were not nonsense. Then the emperor said he had something more suitable for his wife. He took a medallion out of his pocket and asked her to squeeze it in her palm. Ezebia leaned towards the emperor and squeezed the medallion in her palm. At that moment, the entire greenhouse was illuminated with a bright light flickering throughout the room. The girl realized that this was a magical artifact. She said it was simply wonderful. Something like this is not easy to obtain. Kavana said he got it from the dwarves after one of his successful transactions. And judging by Ezebia's smile, he was not wrong about the gift. The heroine smiled widely and thanked the man, saying she would never forget this day. Then the emperor pulled her towards him and kissed her tenderly on the forehead. He said he hoped the girl didn't mind, but asked her to let him know if she suddenly felt uncomfortable being so close to him. Then he gently placed his hand on her cheek and asked if he could continue. He said he wished to kiss her, but needed permission. The girl shyly said she didn't mind. The next moment, Quena pressed his lips against hers and kissed her insistently. At that moment, the heroine remembered his words that she hadn't been close to anyone before, but he kissed like a completely experienced man. The girl's face turned red, and she briefly moved away from the man. Kavana told her not to lose her breath. The girl replied that it was difficult to control her breathing in such a situation. The man said that in that case, she should practice more. After all, she was embarrassed to share a bed with him at first. But now that she has gotten used to it, the same will happen with kisses. Kavana asked if everything was all right, and Ezebia replied that she liked everything. Then the emperor kissed her again, this time more forcefully. He made the girl lie down on the bench and hovered over her, never stopping kissing her. Time passed, and the couple noticed that the lights had gone out. Kavana said this is magic from the scroll, that they couldn't shine for long. Ezebia was surprised. Did the man really waste the magic scroll just for her? The emperor said that her smile is much more valuable than any magic. He also said that he made a promise to himself that if he ever got married, he would make his wife the happiest woman in the world. A wedding and a family were conceivable luxuries for a slave. Ezebia thought, for her this union was nothing more than a political unification of two countries. But Quena did everything possible to make this marriage happen. All this time he was kind and honest with her, and she responded to him with lies and malice. Then, the girl reached out her palm towards the man's face and asked him to forgive her. She said she knew he was forbidding her to develop a cure for her own good. She knows very well what it is like to watch her loved ones die before her eyes. But that is why she needs to develop her own medicine, because sclerosis takes people's family members away. And friends, someone needs to put an end to this. Kavana said that in that case, he did not dare to stop her. He was always amazed by the girl's strength, and he already knows what kind of person she is. She will stop at nothing if she makes a decision one day. He only hoped that the girl would not neglect her safety in pursuit of her goal. Kwenna wanted to kiss Azibia again, when suddenly she said she had an idea. They should distribute the medicine through hidden means. The girl said they could create an anonymous trade guild, although this might not strengthen her position immediately as it would remain secret. But at least they will be able to guarantee the safety of those who sell and buy medicines. Of course, this was possible on the condition that the emperor allowed her and Simon to develop it. Then the man asked if his permission was the only thing stopping her. He didn't understand how it had happened that she needed his permission. Kwenna's face turned red. He said that if he had known that would make the girl so happy, he would have agreed immediately. Then he got up from the bench and said he would think about how to protect her and her research. Before he could leave, Esivia grabbed his sleeve and asked if he would stay to sleep in her rooms tonight. The man's face turned even redder, and he asked if girls felt lonely sleeping alone. The heroine replied that everything here was new to her, that she still had to meet everyone. Until then, she needs Kwenna by her side. Then the man replied that, without a doubt, he would always be by her side. At that moment, memories of that terrible day flashed through his head again. He remembered opening the carriage door, and tears immediately appeared in his eyes for what he saw. Esivia lay inside, with a bloody arrow sticking out of her chest. He remembered carrying her lifeless body outside and holding her in his arms, hoping she would regain consciousness. But this did not happen. Returning to reality, the man hugged his wife tightly and swore to her that he would always be by her side. When the couple returned to the palace, Juana told the woman that there was an underground tunnel beneath this room that served as an escape route in case of emergency. There are 16 tunnels under the palace, so Azibia asked how she could find them. She didn't remember seeing any suspicious retractable handles anywhere. The man said they were hidden from prying eyes and called her to the table. He touched one of the figures that were on the table, and it turned out to be a switch. He asked the girl to remember that the desired figure was the third from the left. She only needed to press the button. At that moment, the hidden door located in the wall opened, revealing a long staircase leading the couple down. Juana went to the door and offered his hand to his wife, inviting her to enter. The girl accepted his invitation, and together they went down the stairs. Juana asked Azibia to watch her steps so as not to fall suddenly. He said that the hall was not yet fully equipped, but there was everything necessary for its exploration. The girl was shocked. She couldn't even imagine that the palace had such a place. It seemed magical. The man said that the magic is what a girl will accomplish, because not everyone would dare to take a cure for sclerosis. Azibia chuckled and said it was all Simon's idea. At that moment, Aslin and Simon entered the room. The doctor had many thick books in his hands. The girl was surprised to see Aslin here. Then the man said that he was responsible for the construction of this tunnel. When His Majesty ordered its construction, the idea seemed strange to him. But now he understands who it was all for. The man said he needed to review the research plans because his tasks were serious, so his help might not be superfluous. Simon said that Lord Aslin had offered to help organize all the patient information. The man said he only had information on the temple patients, but the doctor said it was still very laborious work. They need to group patients by symptoms and then by age and gender. Azibia then turned to the men and told them she was very grateful to both of them. She wondered if Lord Aslin had been extremely cautious with her when they first met. But now he is trying to help her achieve her goal, and she will not take it for granted. The girl tied her hair up in a ponytail and told them they should start. Besides, Simon mentioned some pending procedures. Juana looked at the girl with love, and his cheeks flushed slightly. A week has passed since that day. Azibia went down to the tunnel to ask how Simon was doing. The boy replied sadly that everything was still quiet for now. He said that in every case, sclerosis occurred suddenly and asymptomatically. The incubation period was also variable, and age and gender had no influence either. However, he gathered everything he could and handed the papers to the girl, for which she was very grateful. However, she thought to herself that they had been working for days without success. The lack of progress made the work unbearable. She was sure there had to be at least some clue. The girl was so immersed in her thoughts that she didn't notice how the ink bottle sitting on her desk suddenly swayed and fell. The entire contents spilled over the desk. Marian immediately rushed over to her. She told her she would clean everything up right away. Then, Azibia noticed that all her fingers were stained with ink. Moreover, all the documents she was working on were also covered with black dots. Marian noticed that the Empress works tirelessly, and that is why such embarrassments happen. However, Ezebia said it was her duty, that she shouldn't give up. Then the maid invited her to have some tea, while she refilled the bottle with new ink. Soon Marian prepared her tea, with the leaves Rimbella sent her. The empress noticed that the drink tasted simply wonderful. The maid said that the former imperial residence of Fernine was doomed to watch, as sclerosis relentlessly took the lives of the empire's inhabitants. For years, people suffering from it were doomed to death, until Empress Ezebai arrived in Ryodan. The mere thought that someone desperately wants to help people and their families gives them the strength to keep going. Ezebia said that these feelings are mutual. Without Marian, life outside here would be unbearable for her. Marian said it was worth preparing her tea with water from Fakar. This river is real evidence of the goddess's patronage over their lands. All nearby waters flow into Fakar. The crystal-clear water in the river's springs is considered an ideal base for tea. The maid said this from personal experience. She grew up in a village near Upper Fakar. The locals drank water directly from the river. It was very pure. Ezebia said it sounded very exciting. There were no large rivers like Fajar and Arkai. Then she asked how long the woman had lived there. The maid replied that she lived there until she was 14. She had to look for work in the capital to support her family. Edith moved after the death of her parents. She suffered from multiple sclerosis and needed care. Ezebia was surprised that Marian did not contract multiple sclerosis, despite living under the same roof. Edith came to the capital after the infection and lived alone for years before that. The village protected the Fihar River. Suddenly, the girl jumped up from her chair. The thought of the great river that carries water from every corner of the country invaded her. Suddenly, she took her papers, which were stained with ink. Ezebia couldn't believe it. Could the Fihar River be the origin of the infection? Shortly after this, she went to the emperor and told him that he should have guessed it sooner, and that now she wanted to check this river. Sclerosis is spreading throughout the country, but some regions are less affected than others. These regions have recently prospered thanks to mining, and the Fajar does not flow through these lands. From these regions, only immigrants looking for work got infected, she stated. Thus, she hypothesized that sclerosis was transmitted through water. After a while, Ezebia set out to check the river. A boy approached her. He offered to sell her a rose. He told her it was watered with Fakar water, which contains the goddess's grace. This is an ideal gift for newlyweds. The boy soon realized that perhaps these two were not newlyweds, and hurried to apologize. But Ezebia said there was nothing wrong with that. She arrived here with Quanah and said they had a new month. The heroine said she had never posed as someone else before, but it seems their disguise is working. So far no one has recognized them. The emperor said he wasn't used to this, that he had never disguised himself during the day. As a rule, these missions are carried out at night. Ezebia said it sounded fun, but the man said she shouldn't leave the palace at night. After all, even in such peaceful times, one can never predict what dangers might await her. They only got this far thanks to her research. The girl didn't even think the emperor was so worried about this, because he had already given his consent. Juana said he had his doubts when she asked. However, he has already decided to listen to his wife, as she has become one of the leading experts in the field of sclerosis research. Simon and Oslin also admire her insight. Ezebia said the man was flattering her. However, the emperor spoke seriously. The girl was a natural stateswoman. Gradually, this became a problem, as no disguise could hide her radiance. The girl tried to ignore it, saying she was nothing special, but her cheeks blushed from such compliments. Juanala drew her close and kissed her, saying that even now he couldn't stop admiring her beauty. The couple kissed for a while, but soon Ezebia said they shouldn't, because they had important things to do. The man said he would take a water sample, and the girl decided to ask the people. Maybe she could learn something from them. Then, the emperor said that if anything happened, she had to give a signal to the man in blue standing behind the tree. It turned out he meant Commander Jaxer, who had been watching them this whole time. Quanah said that he was no longer a commander, that he was just a retired soldier following his instructions, and that the girl should not pay attention to him. Then the man went to the river to take a sample. Ezebia said she would wait for him. She thought to herself that it was good that he allowed her to do this. Despite all his fears, without his permission, everything would have been much more difficult. All the evidence points to the river, but it would be better to confirm her conjectures. After all, not everyone who drank water from the river fell ill with sclerosis. The girl understood that the local flowers might know something about this. Then she touched one of the flowers with her finger to hear its voice. The flowers immediately cried out for help. They said there was something in the water and invited the girl to look at their memories of that day. Esivia saw a stranger in a long black coat walking towards the river. He lowered his hand and touched the river surface. A few moments later, a dark and gloomy energy flowed from his hand and filled the river waters. Esivia knew something was wrong here. She had never felt such horror before. She suddenly realized that she knew this magic. This was exactly what killed her in her previous life. The girl couldn't understand why she felt the same magical signature in the water. The alchemist working with her brother Dietrich should be in Archai by now. Was it really the same person who contaminated the Fihar waters? It turns out Dietrich is behind all this. Esivia was so shocked that she didn't notice her hat fall off her head. She couldn't accept that countless innocent citizens were now in danger. The girl stopped near the river and thought, if Dietrich is behind all this, what is he trying to achieve? If the alchemist in Dietrich's service was capable of cursing an entire river, then it would have been easy for them to start a war. They would have done it without difficulty, but instead, they sent diseases downstream, even knowing that the right medicine was needed. It could slow the spread of sclerosis for years. Then Esivia suddenly realized that there was now a monopolization of medicine and a price manipulation through the guild. She remembered Dietrich's words that there was someone else on his side, whose help was beyond imagination. She also recalled the encounter between Marion and the nobleman Edwin, who asked her to carry out a small request for which she would be generously rewarded. He said it was necessary to sow discord between him and the aristocracy to bring Ryodan to its knees. The heroine concluded that Dietrich was using these proceeds to destroy the empire from within. All this time, the Gilera Trade Guild had been collaborating with her brother. Esivia decided that she needed to tell him all this before it was too late. At that moment, Juana approached her with his hat in his hands. The girl immediately ran to the emperor and told him that everything was much more serious than they expected. However, she suddenly stopped, wondering if he would even believe her. She didn't know if she could afford to tell him the truth, because maybe she wouldn't be able to convince him. She couldn't just say what she discovered without revealing the truth about how she managed to obtain this information. She remembered Dietrich's words that to outsiders, her supposed magic would be nothing more than a cheap trick, and all his subjects would be disappointed to learn that their princess's abilities were limited to chatting with plants. The heroine feared that Quanah would be disappointed when he found out about her pitiful ability. Then the man hugged her and told her that everything was fine. The girl didn't understand why her husband suddenly decided to hug her so tightly. Quanah said he did this because he couldn't calmly tell her everything, and although he had no idea what was going on, he could say one thing: he would not doubt a single word of what the girl would say. He said he completely trusted Esivia, and these words made the girl cry. The heroine held the emperor tightly and decided to tell him the whole truth. Night soon fell, and Juana learned that she had such an ability, but he couldn't even imagine that such a thing was possible. Esivia said she would understand if he was disappointed in her. Even she would hate knowing that her secrets were revealed to others. The man asked her what she was talking about, because if it weren't for her ability, they would never have been able to discover the origin of the disease. Everyone owed their lives to her. Then the girl shyly lowered her head and thanked the man for his trust. She said she was glad to be of use to him and promised to put an end to her sclerosis soon. It seemed to her that she was already very close to a solution. After that, the couple returned to the tunnel. The heroine said they needed to carefully study the patient's condition after taking the existing medicine. Esivia thought that now they knew the cause of the disease, so continuing to look for something in common among the sick was simply useless. It is obvious that the medicine from the Giller trade guilds has a special component that can resist the disease. Then Simon said that if you think about it that way, the patients whose condition improved would have white spots. It turned out that the patients had white spots on their chest and stomach. So the girl thought that Edith had exactly the same symptom. She added that all these patients were in critical condition before their condition improved. Aslin said that while sclerosis is an incurable disease at the moment, these patients must have taken painkillers, and it is believed that one of the ingredients caused the spots. Simon shouted indignantly and said that it was possible, but that magic could change the structure of the medicine, and it wouldn't be easy to recognize it. So, Esivia said that skin spots were more common among elves. She read about this in one of the books. Apparently, it was somehow related to elven herbs. So, the girl suggested that the elven herb could be used to make medicines. If so, it could be the key clue they have been looking for all along. Meanwhile, in the archive forest, a meeting took place between Dietrich and a stranger in a black cloak. The man said that the wizard is the only person in Arkai who dares to make him wait. It turned out that the stranger's name was Roman. He asked the man for forgiveness, saying he had business to attend to, which is why he was late. Dietrich asked how his experiment was going, and the man replied that he would soon be very satisfied with the result. Trade with other races also proved quite profitable. Medicine generates enough income to cover all expenses. Dietrich wished his sister were half as valuable as Roman, but he couldn't gather a shred of useful information for him. Roman chuckled and asked if His Majesty remembered his advice. He said that Dietrich urgently needed to deal with her, as soon as the princess became an obstacle to them. Dietrich asked if his sister seemed like an obstacle to them. Roman replied that his spy was reporting that the emperor and empress had gone undercover to see Fehar. Maybe it was an innocent day trip, but maybe not. Extra vigilance never hurts. Dietrich asked if they had really guessed anything, but Roman assured him that the princess could never catch him. After all, to her, he is just a faceless shadow in the darkness. Meanwhile, in the tunnel there was an active conversation about the medicine. Simon couldn't understand how it hadn't occurred to him to check all the components of the medicine. Apparently he really knows nothing about magic. The girl wanted to object to him, but the doctor immediately ran to her and smiled broadly. He took her hand and told her that this was simply incredible. He said he would really like to learn more about herbs. This could take the research to a whole new level. Many scientists do not give due importance to herbology. At that moment, Quena entered the tunnel. He said that, apparently, their quest might well be crowned with success. Esivia immediately ran to him and told him that they had managed to recognize one of the components. It was a medicinal herb widely used by the Dark Elves, but this poses a problem, because they do not have the ability to obtain elven herbs. So, the Emperor said there was a possibility, and Oslin confirmed his words. The man said that His Majesty had taken several steps to counteract the monopoly of trade with non-human races. They managed to establish trade relations with the gnomes without the guild's knowledge. Perhaps this fact will help them, as gnomes and dark elves have been allies for a long time. Azibia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Could they really use their connections to arrange a meeting with the dark elves? Soon, Oslin arrived at the meeting in the tavern, where a red-bearded dwarf was waiting for him. He said that meeting the elves was the stupidest thing he had heard from a person today. Oslin tried to dissuade him, but he didn't understand what he meant. He felt that the dwarf trusted him. Then he said he wouldn't argue, because the deal only fattened their wallets. They even thought about establishing trade with other partners, given the Galayer Guild's monopoly with the Dark Elves. But this is a completely different story. And although they got along well with the elves, their hatred for humanity is much deeper than everyone thinks. They would never agree to meet a person, even if the dwarves asked them to. He also said that the elves were being attacked, and many of the victims were those who settled near human settlements, and that people were blamed for this. Oslin understood that his whole plan was falling apart. The dwarf said that the elves were indeed their longtime allies, but that he couldn't just bring people to them. Besides, the man didn't even tell him his real name. He said that if he only wanted their herbs, he had the seeds and would give them to him as a token of appreciation for their joint business. And although Oslin tried to stop him, the dwarf turned around and said goodbye to him, wishing him good luck. The man took the bag and brought it to the emperor. Kavana said he had no idea that the elves were in such difficult times. Esivia said that they somehow managed to obtain the seeds, but she doubted they could cultivate them without the help of the elves. The man was upset about disappointing his wife, but the woman said it was okay because he couldn't have foreseen it. Esivia understood that it was too early to give up. Quanai and Oslin did their best to get the seeds, and now everything depends on her. She must find a solution. Several days have passed since then. Once, the emperor surprised his wife in an underground tunnel and said that he had already gotten used to starting his day here. Esivia said she found a record of the dark elves using magic to grow their herbs. And although their magic is not very effective, it combines well with the earth's energy. And the only thing that can be done now is to watch and wait. She thought that the seeds were the only clue at that moment. She had to make them germinate, but the girl doubted if she had enough magic for that. Suddenly, Quena turned the girl towards him and hovered over her, saying she was cold. And then he asked her how long she had been there. The emperor reported that Marion was worried about her health. He said that the empress was eating and sleeping poorly, and besides, she was losing weight rapidly. He said that Marion is not the only one worried. The man kissed Esivia's hand, saying that everyone was worried about her. Everyone wants the girl to be freed from the burden that oppresses her, and they are doing everything in their power to help her. The emperor himself wishes to return to those times when he could bring fresh flowers to his wife, who was still sleeping. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time, asking the girl not to leave him alone today. Then Ezebia thought she had truly lost sight of the reason why she was fighting, and the people who gave her the strength to try again and again. And again, it was only thanks to this man that she began to love these lands and cherish them. Then the girl approached the man and placed the palm of her hand on his cheek. She asked him if she could kiss him. Esivia said she understood this was a bit unexpected, but the man stopped her, telling her they hadn't done this in a long time, that they should practice more often. Kwanna leaned towards his wife intending to kiss her, but the girl stopped him. She herself approached the emperor and told him that this time the initiative was hers. Kwanna passionately pressed Esivia's lips before taking her by the waist and pressing her tighter against the table. He went down to her neck and began covering it with hot kisses, which made Esivia moan softly. When they finished, the man sat his wife on his lap and told her he didn't know when they would have a chance like this next time, so he didn't want to let her go now. However, he said he wouldn't stay with her, because he perfectly understands that she has a lot of work. He just wanted to enjoy this moment a little longer. Then Esivia, suddenly, said that in her homeland Arki, they called her the last hope. The people hadn't known protection for centuries, and placed in her the hope that one day she would restore Arki to its former greatness. Everyone trusted her, and before she knew it, she had already taken on this unbearable burden. However, thanks to Juana, everything changed. She made her understand that there are people who truly care about her, and who will see her no matter what. And she simply had to reciprocate the support. And if she was going to fight the disease, only with the emperor by her side, because there was no one she trusted more than him. Suddenly, the girl felt that the man had something in his pocket. Juana was embarrassed and said she needed to get this. It turned out to be a bottle of river water. It was collected this morning, and the man thought the girl would need a new sample for research. Why did he suddenly press the bottle against his forehead and say that sometimes he is surprised by how pathetic he is? After all, it makes no sense to be on the imperial throne if he cannot even help his empress. As he should. If he were a sorcerer, he would be of much more use. Esivia laughed and said it seemed as if he had become emperor only for her. But the man said yes. The girl said that Lord Oslin wouldn't like this joke, but Juana said she wasn't joking. He said that there was a time when he longed to wield magic powerful enough to fix the world with his will. So the girl said that in that case, it was good that he had chosen a different path. Then he held out his hands to take the bottle. She asked him to imagine that this bottle was his heart, and that the water was the amount of mana it could hold. Every creature is born with a predetermined amount of mana. Some people may have a small amount of mana, just enough to fill a bottle. At the same time, people are born with an amount of mana comparable to an entire river. Those people are called sorcerers. There are very few sorcerers among the sorcerers. Even those who have a predisposition for magic often do not have enough mana to unlock their potential. To master magic, a man must at least be of another race, for example, an elf. Quinath laughed and said that the girl managed to make Nikos a human dream. Esivia said she only wanted to describe an objective picture to him. Then she asked if the girl had ever met sorcerers, to which the heroine replied that she had never seen them. However, she always wanted to see them, because sorcerers have a special magical signature that can be recognized by other people with magical abilities. Suddenly, the girl froze in thought. Thinking about it, she felt something from Edith, although the signature was too weak for her to understand it immediately. But it couldn't be a mistake. It turns out that Edith is a person who was born with a predisposition for magic, and this explains everything. It seemed strange to the girl that sclerosis was spreading among people, when the key to curing it was the elven herb. Skin discoloration is common among elves, as they are all born with an affinity for magic, and this symptom is somehow transmitted by infected sclerosis. It turns out that this disease is a weapon aimed at people with magical abilities. Esivia ran out of the room, still unable to shake off these thoughts. Not even Quanna could stop her. Meanwhile, the story shifts to the office of the guild leader, Guillermo Man, who said that there is an urgent matter that requires the intervention of his subject. and he also asked how the banquet preparations were going. The man replied that everything was going according to plan and that all invitations had been sent. However, Galayer said he had one more invitation to send. It was for guests of honor, whom he eagerly awaited. The letter was addressed to the imperial palace. Soon the man Edwin saw Mariana again and asked how she and her lover were doing. The maid replied that she was doing well, that as always she was regularly fulfilling her duties, and she spent her free time in the library. She hadn't contacted anyone since that tea party, so Marian assumed she didn't really like socializing with aristocrats. Edwin chuckled and said that she had once again become a useless princess in a cage. Marian said she didn't notice anything noteworthy. Then, the man handed her an invitation to a banquet from the Jiger Trade Guild. He said it was a gesture of goodwill from the aristocracy before the cure spread throughout the country. He asked Marian to draw the Empress's attention to the banquet. Her Majesty should be interested in the opportunity to find new useful connections. If it is difficult to convince her, then you must send her an invitation somewhere where she can find it. For example, in her chambers. Then the maid asked whose order it was, specifically from Edwin, or from his partners. The man replied that it didn't matter, that the events would be extremely memorable, and that he would await news from Marian. The girl just looked at him silently, not knowing what to answer. Meanwhile, Esivia decided to go to the hospital wards to see Edith. She touched her hand and realized she was right. Everyone who ended up here due to sclerosis has mana. Then the Empress got up and turned to Simon, who was accompanying her. She said that she seemed to have discovered the truth behind the disease. Soon everyone gathered to discuss this matter. The girl said she felt traces of mana in everyone infected with sclerosis. This could not be just a coincidence. Sclerosis spreads only among people inclined towards magic. Juana was worried about what would happen to his wife, which meant she was also in danger. Esivia asked him not to worry, because she hadn't noticed any symptoms yet. She said she tried to soak her hand in river water, suppressing her magic as much as possible. But her fingers only went numb, but there were no other symptoms. Apparently, the disease only affects those who have a small amount of mana. Many people don't even realize they have magic because there is so little of it. And this evil plan affects the majority of the Empire's citizens. Upon learning of the plan, Oslin immediately asked if the Empress really meant that sclerosis was artificially created. And the girl confirmed that it was so. The girl thought that this disease arose as a result of magical intervention from the water of the Fahar River. She apologized for not telling him sooner, saying that she first wanted to make sure of everything in person before expressing her suspicions. Oslin said better late than never and thanked her for her honesty. He added that they just needed to find a solution and also asked her if she knew what type of magic was being used. However, the girl did not know the answer to this question because magic is in many respects similar to writing, and only with the most thorough study can the truth be revealed. To dispel the magic cast into the river, they must first discover the purpose of the spell and put an end to everything. This is an almost impossible task, unless they directly interrogate the person who cast the magic. Therefore, everyone came to the conclusion that there must be a connection between the guild master and the sorcerer behind this. Simon shouted, after all, they risk the innocent lives of common people for profit. Who would knowingly commit such an atrocity? Esivia said they need to control themselves. Not all is lost. She reported that Marian had received an invitation from the guild master. Oslin realized that they wanted to spread the cure throughout the empire and intended to announce it at the banquet. The girl said the invitation was addressed to her. They want to see her at the banquet. So Oslin slammed the table and said this wasn't even up for discussion. He realized that they were running out of time, but that they shouldn't fall into such an obvious trap. Juana placed his hand on his wife's shoulder and told her she shouldn't do this. Esivia said she was well aware of the risks, but that it would only make things worse for her if she stood idly by, knowing that people were dying. Furthermore, there is a possibility that a sorcerer will appear at the banquet, and even if he doesn't appear, she will be able to look for connections between the guild master and this very sorcerer. She said she and the emperor could do it together. She would like a man to be present when she meets Guild Master Galayer. She needs his help like nothing else. Juana knelt down and kissed her hand, saying he couldn't refuse when she trusted him so much. He then ordered a reply to be sent to the guild master, but Oslin was very outraged by this decision. But Quinath declared that the emperor and Empress Ryadona would gladly accept the invitation to the banquet. Soon the day of the banquet arrived. Esivia thought it was just a social event, but they even prepared the hunting ground. She knew the guild had a rich history, but she didn't expect them to own such vast forests. Quinath said the forest is full of insects and wild animals. You never know when they will attack you. It is too dangerous here, and the girl is very fragile. The girl thought about it. She couldn't get Marian's words out of her head that the emperor visited the kitchen every day. The maid herself found this out yesterday and immediately reported it to the empress. His Majesty tastes the dishes for the girl. He insists that he can taste every dish himself to make sure they are safe, which gives the chefs a good amount of work. The girl didn't understand why he would go to such lengths for her. Marian assumed that he cared deeply for her and her well-being. Everyone became worried when Esivia expressed her desire to attend the banquet personally. However, now that they knew how important the girl was to the emperor, everyone was sure she would return home safe and sound. As long as Juana is by her side, she has nothing to fear, so she should go and return to the future of this nation for the sake of them all. Suddenly, the heroine heard a strange voice in her head again. However, at that moment the emperor addressed her, so she immediately pushed the intruders out of her mind. She wondered who she was to him. The girl wondered what she herself felt for him. Juana said that if she changed her mind, then all she had to do was say so. It wasn't too late to leave. Then the heroine squeezed his hand and told him that she was here with the emperor, that nothing could go wrong. She thought to herself that there were some things she could say with confidence. She felt completely safe by his side. The sound of a horn distracted her from her thoughts. A red-haired man stepped onto the stage, thanking the distinguished guests for honoring him with their presence. Esivia listened carefully to his voice, catching every word. The man introduced himself as Roman and greeted everyone today on this festivity. The girl then realized that this was the guild master himself. Roman said that before starting, he wanted to remind everyone that every creature in this forest is under strict surveillance, and the safety of the guests is his top priority so they can enjoy the preserve. Kavana said he would go into the forest and that the girl should stay near its outskirts. The man said he would do everything in his power to obtain the information he needed. Esivia wished him a successful hunt, and with that they parted. She handed her handkerchief to the emperor, telling him that in the south there is a custom of gifting a handkerchief to a knight one wishes to keep close. Quana kissed the handkerchief, telling himself that this time he would definitely become her knight. Meanwhile, Roman stepped onto the center stage and addressed everyone present. He announced the start of the hunt. Soon Esivia, Simon, and Jaxer arrived at the designated spot. The girl thought it must be quite far. This forest is one of the places where the guild carries out operations. There must be at least some clues here. Then she pressed against the tree, saying she needed its help, and asked it to share its wisdom with her. However, as soon as the tree realized the sorceress was speaking to it, it immediately pushed her away. Esivia realized something was wrong here. Normally, trees aren't this afraid of her. She then asked it to calm down, telling it she would not cause it any harm and only wanted to ask it some questions about the forest owners. The tree continued to yell at her, telling her she was a traitor and a destroyer, and that her place was in hell. Suddenly, the girl felt an incomprehensible sensation. She realized that the tree had decided to share its memories with her. In its memories, she saw a cart with dried trees inside. She wondered what was inside. Suddenly, she saw a dead man's hand sticking out of the cart. The stranger took it and said that this batch was not ready yet and that everything would slow down. The girl soon realized that it was the voice of Guildmaster Gillera. She couldn't understand why he needed the corpses and what those strange sounds surrounding the cart were. Esivia noticed that the man's body started changing as soon as he took off his hood. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Was he really magical? Roman soon turned into a man with white hair and violet eyes. He said he would see what these corpses would be used for. The heroine couldn't believe it. The sorcerer had been posing as the guild master all this time. The magical energy alone was worth it, but she couldn't even imagine that such powerful sorcerers existed. Suddenly, the man turned sharply and looked directly at the spot where the girl was. At that moment, she was suddenly pulled out of his memories. The tree said that the man, because of whom these lands were now in ruins, he had provoked the goddess's wrath, and here, in the forest, he was getting rid of failed experiments and their bodies. The girl looked ahead, stunned, not understanding what was happening here. Soon the girl returned to the banquet, where the emperor was already waiting for her. He noticed that she returned very quickly and asked her if something bad had happened. However, Esivia did not have time to answer, when suddenly Roman approached her, telling her there were no words to express the honor it was for him to receive Empress Ryodona in his home. The girl looked at him silently up close. This magic was much more tangible and had never been seen before. Such was the power of magic, beyond the limits of her imagination. It seemed to the girl that this was the same sorcerer serving her brother. But it was not so. Their magical signatures were different. However, there was a small possibility that it was the same person. She wondered what he was doing with the corpses. Had they really managed to find cures through experiments on people? Roman continued his speech, saying he was incredibly happy to see the emperor and the empress here, and that he couldn't wait to discuss the future of the empire with them. He said the empire is unstable, and there are countless reasons for it. Sclerosis is just one of them. Esivia was trembling, but decided she needed to recover. She needed to reveal the true motive behind the drug monopoly. So the girl said it was said that the Men's Guild had built many pharmacies throughout the empire to facilitate access to medicines. This is commendable, but she still wonders if the availability of medicines is the real reason why common people and current cannot afford them. Roman replied that all these difficulties were outside his competence, that he was only responsible for obtaining the empire's permission to open pharmacies. Even common people who haven't heard of Gilera and his influence are interested in buying his product and receive the necessary treatment, and they just hope to be able to help people return to normal life and give them peace of mind. The girl wanted to object, but the man interrupted her. He said that under current conditions, only two aspects matter for the survival of a nation: military strength and capital. Without them, rulers cannot maintain the loyalty of their subjects. In turn, Roman simply offers them a way to ensure the continued loyalty of their subjects. So the heroine said that apparently, the welfare of his people is the last thing the man cares about. She was trembling, but continued saying that Roman was asking permission from the empire, and at the same time, he wasn't ashamed to admit that he was only seeking profit. Why is all this happening? Cassie went crazy trying to uncover Dietrich's plans, but every day only brought new enemies. Esivia was sure she couldn't do anything alone, and at that moment, the ghost's hands reached out to her shoulders again. At that moment, the emperor placed his hand on his wife's shoulder, thus scaring away the ghost from her. He said that if this was Roman's goal, then the empire was forced to deny his guild permission. The empress does not seem to like his request, and he is simply an obedient husband who wants to make his wife happy. Roman smiled falsely, saying he was grateful they were looking at his proposal anyway. So he decided to end this conversation, so as not to spoil their impression of the celebration, saying that the honorary bones would have much more interesting things to be today. Soon all the guests went out to see the beautiful fireworks. The emperor asked his wife what she wanted to tell him, but the girl said she couldn't say it here either, since there were many ears here. Esivia thought to herself that sometimes situations seem completely hopeless, and what she wants to achieve seems completely impossible. The emperor looked at the girl with concern, not understanding what she was thinking. Esivia thought about how Quena always managed to calm her down somehow just by being near her. Then she said that everything was fine, that nothing could go wrong when he was here. By his side, the girl leaned in to kiss him, thinking that she was still trying to sort out her feelings for him. She wasn't even sure if she could find the right words to describe their relationship. But once they sort things out and prevent the imminent war, she would like to open up to him so he can accept her as she is. The couple kissed tenderly, thinking that this moment should last forever. Then suddenly, they realized what they had done, and their faces immediately turned red. The emperor pulled away from the girl and told her he would bring her a drink. He took the glass from the waiter and tasted it to make sure it didn't contain poison. When he realized everything was fine, he handed the glass to the girl. Esivia said she wasn't the one who needed a taster, but the emperor. The man said he wasn't as important as she thought, but the girl had a different opinion. The man said he bet no one here had the same recovery capacity as him, so he couldn't find a better taster. Then he turned to Sevilla to see why she was quiet. Suddenly, he saw blood coming out of her mouth. Juana immediately ran to her and dropped his wine glass. However, the girl's eyes were already covered by a bloody veil, and the last thing she saw was the surprised face of her husband, who didn't understand what was happening, because he had already told her that everything would be fine. The girl fell, and the emperor immediately caught her, trying to hold her in his lap. He said it was all his fault. He allowed himself to be so greedy. He was willing to give his life for Esivia. That was his wish. Quinath pressed against the woman's body and began to cry. He said he would never forgive this. He promised he would find whoever did this and tear him apart alive. He would rip out his tongue while he begged for his life. He would make his family watch and feel the same way he felt. Esivia tried to stop him. She shouldn't have let him, but her condition was so bad she couldn't say a word. She understood that if nothing was done now, everything would happen again. The war would start again. Meanwhile, the fireworks continued. All the other guests were shocked by what was happening, and only Roman stood next to the couple and smiled with satisfaction. Quinath pressed against his wife's bloody dress, feeling life leaving her every second. The man tried to revive her, but it was in vain. Simon tearfully said that perhaps they still had time to save her. They needed to do something before it was too late, but the emperor seemed not to hear anyone. His eyes were vacant. Suddenly, he heard a voice telling him that he had failed again. The voice said that the emperor knew this was his only chance, but he still lost it. The man was about to shout in helplessness, when suddenly someone touched his shoulder. It was Yaxer, and he said they had captured the culprit. This man confessed everything, and said it was he who poisoned the empress's wine. Kayvana carefully placed the girl on the floor and stood up. Yaxer said it was necessary to take the murderer away and start an investigation, but the man did not listen to him. He walked silently towards him, holding a sword in his hands. Juana raised his sword above the cook's head and brought it down sharply. However, he did not kill the man, he only struck the ground with his sword. Instead, he stomped on his head with his boot, screaming and asking where to find the antidote. But the man said he knew nothing about it. The emperor didn't believe him, because he himself admitted what he had done and now dares to pretend to be an idiot. Then he raised his sword over him again and asked who his master was. Meanwhile, Ezebia felt strange sensations. She felt pain, her whole body seemed to be on fire. She didn't understand what was happening, and it seemed like she was dying. Before losing consciousness, she suddenly heard her husband's voice. She understood that if she died right now, the future would repeat itself, so she needed to calm down. And think, the girl wondered if it was really the wine, but Juana was fine when he tasted it. It must be some kind of substance that affects certain victims. This is something that affects those who have magic, just like sclerosis. Esivia realized she needed to try to remember how she managed to adjust her magic for the experiment. She was going to strengthen her magic just so the poison wouldn't work. She understood that she had to survive. The heroine intended to fight until the end so as not to repeat the fate of her past life. Soon night fell, and it was pouring rain outside. Aslin asked the emperor how long he planned to keep the aristocrats in the palace. After all, even if they are in the guest wing, they will not remain silent. A man cannot keep nobles locked up without a good reason. Quinath said that the murderer acted on the orders of an aristocrat. What other reason is needed? Then he shouted that it was the chef from the palace kitchen, the man the emperor had personally chosen for this position. Moreover, his motives were dreams. He did not change his testimony, not even under torture. The cook said that this was a great nation built on the sacrifices of its people, and the emperor dared to desecrate their memory by lying down with a foreigner. Creature, he said he committed a righteous cause and was now willing to die for it. The emperor wanted to behead him immediately, and only Jaxer could contain his anger. Quinath knew it was obvious that he kept affirming something deeply rooted in his mind. But a simple chef could not have planned everything alone. He said the previous dynasty was obsessed with blood frequency, so it wouldn't be surprising if the House of Ferdinand had something to do with this. But Aslin objected. After all the Ferdinands had been dead for a long time. The emperor killed every single one of them. One of them, Kayvana said, he couldn't be sure of that because someone might have survived. And then Jaxer smiled. He said the cook had already confessed everything. If it is really necessary to recall the ruling family, which has already been overthrown. At best, the emperor will only expose himself as an unreliable fool in the eyes of the court aristocrats. The man said his empire had barely risen from the ashes. It seemed to him that even despite this, it was as if Juana didn't want to do everything possible for her. As rulers, they rebuilt Ryodan from scratch and were responsible for it. However, the emperor did not want to listen to this. He hit the man on the hand and walked away from him. He swore and told everything to hell. Juana said that 5 days had already passed, and Ezebia still hadn't woken up and nothing helped her. Then he said he would interrogate the aristocrats, that he himself would beat the truth out of them, and after which they would beg for death. Jaxer was furious. First, the emperor arrested the nobles without any evidence, and now he was going to torture them. This worthless girl drove him crazy. However, Oslin asked him to mind his language, saying she was his wife, and since he didn't feel it, he could be understood. Jaxer cursed, saying that Oslin had no idea what he was talking about because he hadn't seen it any other way. He said that this is not the Quanek they know, that he has completely lost his mind. Meanwhile, the emperor kept sitting by his wife's bed, not letting go of her hand, hoping that one day she would give him a sign and move. Throughout this time, the rain did not stop throughout the empire, and somewhere deep inside Ezebia was still alive. She really wanted to help the emperor. The story shifts many years back to the mountains of Ryodan. Once upon a time, there was a quarrel between people in these mountains. One of them said that some insolent worm dared to contradict his master, so the boy was beat. The young man said that every year he encountered slaves who forgot their place, and every time he taught them manners lessons. Then he ordered the useless boy to be locked in a stall, but it turned out that this boy was Quanek himself. At that time, he was 14 years old. The boy was locked up with the horses. The men ordered that he not be given a drop of water without their permission. He wanted to see how long he would last here. Quanek silently took care of his tormentor. He didn't understand how many days had passed since his imprisonment. He didn't have a drop of water in his mouth and understood that he would soon die of thirst. Then he thought maybe it would be better. But at that moment, a blonde girl approached the stall. She wanted to go unnoticed to see who was in the stall, but accidentally tripped over a pile of hay. And she fell. Quena immediately jumped up and asked who it was. The girl apologized, saying she just saw that someone was lying there and decided to check. It turned out that this girl was Ezebia. The boy was surprised how she could escape the guards, but the girl said there was no one outside. Quena thought they really let him die, and they didn't even leave anyone to watch him, because they were sure he would definitely die. Ezebia asked if the boy was all right. She wanted to call a doctor, but Kavana told her not to waste time. He simply asked to be left to die, because people from high birth always didn't care about the lives of slaves. Ezebia didn't understand why he said that. She couldn't just leave him here to die. The boy was too sick to take care of himself, and he could think whatever he wanted. But she was going to help him. The girl kept approaching him every day. Juana did not understand who she was, because he didn't even know her, but he brought her food and medicine every day. And he wondered what such a rich girl was doing in such a remote place. So Ezebia finally decided to introduce herself. She gave her name and said she was from the kingdom of Arche, which is north of here. Juana was incredibly surprised. He knew that Arche was the kingdom sending reinforcements for this monster hunt. Meanwhile, the palace guards kept searching for the princess, but she made no sound. So, Juana realized she wasn't just a rich girl. She was just a bored little princess who found a toy in the form of a dirty slave. Apparently, this was something new for one who never left the palace. Suddenly, the boy noticed the girl had a bandaged leg and asked what had happened to her. She said she stained her clothes yesterday. Her brother saw this and got very upset. He is still looking for a boyfriend for her. He wanted her to marry a member of the Wanan imperial family. The girl didn't pay attention, even though she should have impressed him, so Dietrich scolded her a lot, as a result of which he hurt her. Leg then held her against himself and cried, asking for forgiveness, and said he shouldn't have taken it out on her. But he promised this would not happen again. Quana shouted when he heard about Vanan, a member of the imperial family. He stated that he was not a member of the imperial family, just a distant relative of the ruling house of Fernin. This man does not have silver hair or violet eyes. If he were a prince, he wouldn't hunt a monster in a godforsaken place. Kavana said that Vanan tortured the slave just to pass the time, so the boy got in the way and decided that the man would not leave there alive. The boy said that man is evil. A girl should not impress someone like him. She shouldn't put herself in danger for the sake of a useless slave. He asked the princess not to come to him anymore, so Ezebia said that she really did not want to marry that man. Her leg hurt terribly all night, but she was too afraid to show it. She convinced herself that she deserved it, because it was easier for everyone. But now she realized that she simply turned a blind eye to everything and decided to become Vanan's wife without even trying to find out what kind of person he was. However, Juana was different. Unlike her, he didn't close his eyes. He did everything possible to protect others. The girl said that origin does not define a person. His brother's anger did not stop her from visiting him. She promised to take the boy with her to Archaea, and then she would become his knight. In the south, they say it is tradition for ladies to give their scarves to the knights they prefer. Quana's voice trembled, and he said he was not a knight at all. Then Ezebia smiled widely, saying that to her he was the most incomparable knight. The boy remembered this promise forever, and, for the first time in his life, began to dream of the future without being ashamed of himself. However, he never had the chance to say that it was actually not him who was incomparable, but Azebia. He was sent to the battlefield the next morning. However, the boy always wondered if she remembered her promise. From that day on, he did everything possible to see Azebia again. Juana hoped to become a man worthy of her favor. He awaited the moment to meet her and become her knight. He did everything possible to earn his place by her side, and thus he came to power. Standing in front of the throne of the murdered emperor, he suddenly heard Asevia's voice, and it seemed to him that he even saw curls of her hair. The man could not believe that he actually saw his beloved in front of him. The emperor managed to fulfill his dream and married Asevia, but their marriage was doomed to collapse because the girl was murdered. While holding her corpse, sitting in front of the carriage in which she was murdered, he remembered her words that for Asevia, he was the greatest knight of all. Tears rolled down the man's eyes. He determinedly clung to his wife's corpse, unable to believe that she was really gone. In the end, it turned out that Asevia was wrong. He could not save what he had fought so desperately for his whole life. Kayvana no longer had anything to fight for. He had nothing to fight for. He didn't even know what the path was right now. He could not become a knight. As the man looked at the empire, drowning in the horror of the revolution, Jaxer rushed to him and told him that they had found a book in the king's chambers. It was said that every ruler has the right to visit the Silver Forest once, the guardian deity of this country. Upon meeting, he can ask for a single wish. Then Quana realized that if he became king of Arche, he could save Asevia. Endless battles continued every day, and all the cities were in flames. Quana searched the entire city for the person he needed, but he couldn't find her anywhere. The last heir of the Cataril line and current ruler, Dietrich Cataril. To meet Silver Forest, he had to kill him and win the throne. Every day, Quana kept clutching the scarf that Azebia had once given him. He then told him that, according to the information received, the mage who killed His Majesty worked for King Arche. If this is true, then they have the name of the person responsible for the Empress's death. Quana clutched the scarf in his hand. He was determined to avenge the death of his beloved wife. However, Oslin asked if this was really necessary, because Arche is already on the brink of extinction. They have been storming the northern mountains for months to catch the king, who will destroy himself if left alone. He was not happy that the emperor's decision would turn Arche's lands into a wasteland. The throne of this small country was more important to him than his duty to the people of the empire. So, the man suggested that this had something to do with the fabulous amount of magic stones the emperor spent to preserve the empress's body. Oslin then reported that Jaxer had died while trying to locate Dietrich, whom the emperor had been searching for so desperately. He was ambushed and killed by the northern troops. Then Oslin shouted, "Is this really the empire that Quena wanted?" The man began to cry, begging the emperor to at least now think about the empire, and about all of them. However, Quena only convulsively squeezed the hands of his dead wife, not wanting to respond to this. Oslin looked at everything that was happening through tears. He recalled happy moments when he, Jaxer, and Quena could get drunk in a bar and have a good time. Tears continued to stream down the man's cheeks, but he did not utter a word. He simply turned around and silently left the bedroom, leaving the emperor alone with his dead wife. Quena tightly hugged Asevia's body and began to cry. After a while, the soldiers informed him that King Arche had finally died, and that they could now return home. Looking at the corpses of his opponents and allies, Quena wondered if this was what he wanted. Was this the empire he dreamed of? When everything was over, the emperor took his wife's body and went to the Silver Forest. He said he was now the king of these lands and asked the deity to grant his wish. Save Azebia. Silver Forest said that Quena is a lonely king who has come a long way to get here. However, he was a foreigner, so the deity could not grant his wish. The man shouted, because the Silver Forest could grant any wish of the ruler of Arche. The deity said that was so, but there were conditions. The emperor's wish must not contradict God's will. The death of this child had already become one of the lines of the primeval scripture, and not even the goddess could erase this trace. The man fell to the ground doomed. If everything was like that, why did he come here? He hoped he could finally see his wife smile again, but she found herself in a place where not even gods could reach her. Asevia told him she would take him with her. He had to keep his promise, but if he couldn't bring her back, he himself would come to her. The man drew his sword, intending to commit suicide, but someone's voice stopped him and said it was too soon for Kwan'aa to despair. Looking up, the man saw a goddess in front of him. It was Fakar, the goddess who created this silver forest and buried her sister here. Kwan'aa didn't understand what she meant by this, because it's too soon to give up. Fakar said that Ezebia is a lonely, bright star, which has the power to eclipse all the evils of this world. And thanks to her radiance, she could flourish again, but her strength was not enough. And life abandoned her stupidly and too easily. So she couldn't help Ezebia make everything as it should be, but she was going to give them this chance at least now. Then Silver Forest shouted and said they couldn't just bring her back to life, that it was already too late. Fakar said they would go back in time. They would return to that moment when her death was still far away. The goddess turned to the Silver Forest, to her beloved little sister. She asked if she wanted to save Ezebia. Silver Forest said that before becoming one of Fahar's children, Ezebia was a guardian, which made the goddess unable to help but mourn losing her. However, the balance of this world is already incredibly fragile. Neither Silver Forest nor Fahar are as strong as before. The goddess agreed to bring her back to life, but troubles had to take hold of her again, because destiny cannot be rewritten. So Fakar said that's why they needed another chance. She turned to Kwan'aa and told him he had given up everything to get her. To conquer this country, Fakar asked if he was willing to fight against destiny again and bring Ezebia back to life by fighting against her fate. The man said he would dedicate his life to protecting her. Silver Forest said that it was difficult to understand. Quinaas became the emperor of Ryodan and even the king of Arkai. He ascended so high, so why does he want to give up everything now? So the man remembered again how they spent time with Ezebia. He said that there are flowers that only grow in the north, and he promised to show them to Quanaq when they were in Arkai. She promised to show him the most beautiful flowers, her favorite books, and everything about the world. The girl said that Marina is sometimes given it for dessert. She loves her very much, but promised to share it with the boy. They will sit by the garden fountains, eat delicacies together, and tell something interesting. Quanaq smiled and said that this will definitely happen. They will definitely be happy. And now, sitting in front of the Silver Forest, the man said that nothing could be done about it. He promised to become the knight of his beloved princess. As soon as he returned to the past, he immediately started looking for Ezebia. He promised her that he would do everything possible never to lose her again. The girl had changed. She became even stronger and wiser than before. When they met, she shouted at the boy, telling him that she was taking care of an injured old man, and he told her that someone was locked in the stable. Then the boy introduced himself and said his name was Marcus. Kavana understood that it was impossible to tell the whole truth yet, because destiny could not be changed. In this life, Dietrich's goal would be to save Ezebia. This means that he will have to become emperor again and protect her. This is his last chance, and this time he swore not to waste it. However, now that Ezebia had been lying in bed for several days without regaining consciousness, Juana did not leave her bed for a minute. The girl's consciousness was still alive, but she seemed to be walking in a void where there was no sound or light. Suddenly, somewhere in the darkness, she heard something, turned around and saw a man in a red cloak. He walked towards her to take her by the shoulder, and then she realized that the man was Quanaq. He held her lifeless body in his hand and cried. And at that moment, Ezebia suddenly moved her hand. Seeing this, the man immediately brought his hand to his lips and began to cry. He was incredibly happy that his wife had woken up. When Ezebia was able to get out of bed, Mariana and Simon were immediately called to the bedroom. The doctor said that something amazing had happened. There wasn't a drop of poison left in her body. The Empress slept for 5 days, and everything was fine. Fine with her body. Mariana said she was poisoned. The girl spent many days unconscious, but despite this, she woke up and returned to them. Simon and the maid burst into tears of happiness. They were incredibly happy that the Empress had finally woken up. Then Ezebia called them and hugged them tightly, telling them never to allow this to happen again, so they should calm down. However, the girl thought to herself that it must have been very difficult for them all this time. Quanaq doesn't show it, but it was incredibly difficult for him too. The heroine couldn't even imagine what he felt all these days. So the girl repeated once more that everything was fine now, and then everyone present in the room calmed down. When the couple was alone, the emperor said that everyone was very worried about the Empress's condition. He even had to dissuade Aslan and Jaxer from coming here. Then Ezebia decided to ask him what happened to Roman. Juana said they are investigating, but the girl just woke up. She shouldn't worry about that either. The heroine thought that her husband still didn't know that Roman was the one who added poison to her drink. She thought that on the day of the banquet so important to the guild, he wouldn't dare harm her. However, she was wrong. He didn't care about this, and in particular, selling a cure for multiple sclerosis. The truth was that Roman only wanted to kill her. In a past life, Dietrich got rid of her with the help of a mage. He used her death as an excuse to cause chaos in the empire. Then, the girl realized that the mage, who followed her brother's orders in a past life. Apparently, it was Roman. The magic was completely different, so she didn't notice him right away. Then she wondered what would happen if all those bodies he collected were necessary to increase his magical power and change it. Then, the girl took her husband's hand and said she understood that this sounded like nonsense, but that she needed to see Roman now. If she found him, she could find out who was behind the assassination attempt. Kayvana looked at his wife suspiciously and said he understood how she felt, but asked her to leave this matter to him. The girl insisted. She said that it was really very important, that she had to see him. Then, the man knelt saying he was very afraid that the girl would be in danger again. If this happened, suddenly he couldn't bear it. Esivia almost died in front of him, and he couldn't help worrying about her, because he almost lost her again. The girl asked him why he was so worried, if something had happened during that time. The man fell silent, and then she said that if he didn't tell her, she would find out herself. Then the emperor replied that Roman had disappeared. This answer surprised the girl. Kayvana asked her to calm down. He was going to explain everything to her. He already said that Roman was arrested the same day, on suspicion of having organized an assassination attempt on Esibia. Aslan interrogated him once a day, and yesterday, when he went to him at the usual time, he discovered something strange. That day, they found out that Roman changed the soldier's appearance for his own, and he simply disappeared. Since they didn't immediately realize his escape, it was now almost impossible to locate him, and someday he might try to harm them again. Kayvana said he didn't want to deceive the girl. He just wanted her to relax and rest, at least until she fully recovered. But everything was his fault. He had no right to drag her into this. He said everything was wrong from the beginning. He drowned in blood just to become emperor. The man turned and bowed his head, saying he had destroyed Esibia. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about. She asked him why he thought everything was his fault. Then Kayvana said he believed that one of the members of the overthrown ruling dynasty would remain alive if there was power in his country, capable of committing an assassination attempt on the empress. Then it was them. Before, he wasn't worried that they might try to take revenge on him. He considered this just a possible inconvenience he would have to deal with in the future to get rid of slavery and revive the country. He couldn't even imagine how this could end. Juana said it was her fault that Esivia was injured. The girl ran to him and told him he was wrong. She decided she needed to tell him everything now. She must say that it is her brother who is behind Roman, not the imperial family. Then, the ghost's voice appeared in her head again. It said that if the girl told him everything now, then her and her brother's plot would be exposed. The ghost mocked the girl and asked if she was really so afraid that the emperor would abandon her. The voice said that not even Esivia's rebirth would change anything. Thanks to her, the war would start again. If Juana found out what she was hiding, she would definitely get very angry. The man took his wife's hand and put it on his cheek, saying he didn't need anything as long as she was by his side. Then he asked her not to leave him. Esibia wondered how she could leave him alone in this hell. He doesn't believe in himself. All his loved ones abandoned him, and she knows from her own experience how terrible that is. But she still did it. Then, the girl pressed against the emperor's chest. She started crying. She begged him to forgive her, saying that she had lied to him and that everything was her fault. She said Roman was a mage. He changed his appearance with the help of magic and escaped, so the soldiers couldn't understand what happened. Behind Roman is his brother Dietrich, and not the survivors of the Fernand family. It was Dietrich who sent her to the emperor to kill her, and then used this as a pretext to start a war with the empire. Juana asked him why he didn't talk about it sooner and ask for help. The girl replied that she didn't want to be separated from the man. He was so kind to her that it made her happy. Esibia wished their marriage would last a little longer. She dreamed of giving him children, heirs to the imperial throne. But in fact, she cannot give him what he desires so much. But despite this, she dared to love him. Esibia feared that if she told him about her brother, her secret would come out. The girl stated that she could not have children. She found out about her infertility shortly before the wedding, but she feared that if the emperor knew, he would immediately dissolve the union. Because when he shared with her what family meant to him, she feared he would never forgive her. And that's why I couldn't tell him, and so I ruined everything. Kavana immediately tried to calm her, telling her that this wasn't entirely true, because he said he didn't need anyone but her. After all, if he can spend his whole life with Azebia, then he won't be afraid of the trials the gods send him. This is all he thought about when he married the girl. He said that heirs have never been more important to him. The man said he loves Azebia very much, and this feeling warms his soul greatly. Then the girl burst into tears, saying she was very scared. Juana asked her if she was afraid that he loved her. Then Azebia said that she loved him very much too. That's why she was scared. She was afraid that one day everything would fall apart. The man decided not to answer and kissed his girlfriend. Then he unbuttoned her dress and invited her to go to bed. Soon the couple went to bed. Quena took off his wife's clothes and then undressed himself. He hovered over her and kissed her hands tenderly. Azebia asked him to stop because she didn't know what to do, but the emperor said it was okay, that he didn't know either. Then the girl suggested that this was also training. Quena took the girl by the legs and lowered her slightly, and then began to cover her legs with kisses, saying that training was no longer necessary. This was the first time Azebia saw Quena like this. He reminded her of someone. He looked like a man she had met a long time ago. Then the girl told him she seemed to have seen him before. Quena just smiled and said she had her head in the clouds. He wanted her to think only of him at that moment. The couple spent the whole night together, drowning in mutual love. When it was all over, the emperor said the girl was right, that he had actually met her before. Even then, he realized that he wanted to marry a beautiful girl named Azebia. That next to him, she was not a princess or the guardian of Arkai. He resorted to a sham marriage due to his impatience and regretted it very much. Then the girl asked why he couldn't recognize her. The man replied that he had changed a lot since then. He had to survive. He gave up everything he had. Time and again, he made wrong decisions. Azebia will be disappointed if she knows what kind of life he lived. But to some extent, he was even glad when he realized that the girl didn't remember him. She said she won't ask him anything he doesn't want to talk about, but that doesn't mean she is disappointed in him. She will wait just as Juana did so he can open up to her and she to him. It will take a long time, but she will never leave him. Because the moment he came to Arkai for her, she chose him. The next morning, the girl asked the emperor again to tell her everything that happened. She wondered what he had to face while she lay there and how Roman had escaped. She was interested in absolutely everything. Kavana looked away embarrassed and said he was very grateful to her for being with him now. However, he wondered if he had gone too far. The girl must be suffering right now. When Azebia realized what he meant, her face immediately turned red. She covered her face with her hands and said it didn't matter anymore, that it was fine now. Then she asked him if he was really going to handle the matter himself so as not to bother her. For her, however, it was much more important that they go through all this together. Azebia wanted to be a true empress for Quena. The man looked at the girl confused. Her face turned red when she took his hands. She apologized, saying she wasn't thinking clearly at the moment, but decided to bring him up to speed and tell him everything he knew. He said that as soon as they learned of Roman's escape, they immediately blocked all exits from the capital. And naturally, they interrogated the soldiers who were on duty that day. They have a duty log, and he could take it to the girl if she wants. Other than this, they still haven't found anything, and only because of Azebia did he find out that Roman is a mage. The girl said that in this case, the information she knew could be useful. She said that at the plant, they had already been shown several times how Roman uses magic. And she saw that he was collecting corpses. These were the bodies of those who were sick with sclerosis. Their bodies had already gone numb. Then, the girl asked the emperor if he later remembered that she said that every person has their own limit of magic they can handle. Roman was originally an exceptional mage, but not enough to cast beyond human standards. Now he was afraid that he was using those corpses to perform black magic. The bodies of those who died from the epidemic are kept in the temple, which means Roman has his own people there. All this seemed very strange to the girl. It didn't matter if Dietrich was behind Roman or not, because the inhabitants of the empire no longer started cooperating with Prince Arkai and the unknown mage. Besides, local aristocrats and priests are very distrustful of outsiders, and they still value legitimacy. So, Juana said that was why he assumed the assassination attempt was organized by a survivor of the Fernane dynasty. He took advantage of the strength that always supported them, the legitimacy of the government, and pure blood. They constantly promoted the idea of how different the origins of slaves were, and aristocrats, and this secured them the loyalty of the conservatives. The man was sure that among the current nobility, there were only those who only pretended to be loyal to the new empire. But in reality, they support the old ways. They don't even care that Fernina practiced incest to preserve the purity of their blood. These aristocrats only want the benefits that can be derived from inequality and slavery. So, Ezebia understood why the emperor was still trying to find the surviving members of the previous dynasty. The man said that, when they founded the Ryodan Empire, they seemed to have dealt with all the heirs. Then he said they looked for people with silver hair and purple eyes. Juana explained that the distinctive trait of the Fernine family is bright silver hair and violet eyes. As far as he knew, those who did not meet these conditions were simply expelled or killed. Ezebia got up from her chair and said that Roman looked exactly like that. He had silver hair and purple eyes. Dietrich allied with Roman not only because he needed power, but they also wanted to use the revival of the Fernine imperial dynasty as a pretext for war. Meanwhile, the story shifts to another family's estate. A man entered the house, and Evelyn Haley said he had returned earlier than usual. This man was Duke Howard. He said that all these so-called aristocrats were gathered at the palace. He reported that Count Godu was arrested, and that the deal was wasted at such an important time. If Evelyn had won over the Empress, all these suspicions wouldn't have existed. The girl decided not to answer anything on this topic and asked him how dinner was. But Howard asked to be left alone. Evelyn went upstairs, and the man stayed alone drinking tea, thinking there was no one anywhere who could help him. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind the door. Out of fear, he dropped the cup and broke it. In the threshold, he saw a man in a long dark cloak and hood. It was Roman. He asked Howard if he had forgotten his face. The Duke asked why he was here. Then, Roman said they had something to talk about, that there was no way he couldn't come. Then he asked Howard why he betrayed him. He said he promised him that if Howard helped him a couple of times and didn't interfere, he would give him whatever he wanted. But he decided to give up everything at the most important moment. Because of him, he had to step in and work hard to fix this with the cook and confuse everyone. If he didn't have enough funds, he would never have gotten involved with an imbecile like him. Howard tried to justify himself, saying he only wanted to restore his family to its former greatness. And Roman's plan was crazy. Then the man smiled and said the Duke didn't stop him. He knew what would happen during the banquet. It was he who received income this whole time from selling a remedy for sclerosis. And he also transmitted information about future reforms to the illustrious Duchess, one of the empire's founders. That she dreams of his fall more than anyone. Frightened, Howard stumbled and fell to the floor. Then, Roman leaned towards him and told him he no longer blamed him, that he came to give him another chance. Howard shouted, saying he didn't need any more chances, that he didn't care what kind of trick Roman was going to pull this time. Then, the man put his palm to his face and said he was going to show the people their rightful ruler, who could wipe out this shaky empire. The next moment, his appearance changed. He said he was talking about the last representative of the Fernine family. Now that they have their sights set on her, the Empress will no longer be able to hide because someone like Howard, who knows the value of true power, is helping him. Roman asked if he knew how he knew, and then told Howard that the Emperor would sell the Mistril mine property. He was also able to escape the palace right under the Emperor's nose. The man said he has his own people in the palace who support him, and that the most important thing in brainwashing magic is desire. It is an obsession with blood purity, a caution towards strangers, and a craving for power and wealth. All he has to do is promise them they will get what they want. Roman's magic worked on Howard, and the color of his eyes changed. He looked more like an obedient doll now. At that moment, a man entered the building and Roman turned towards him. He said that now the Duke will obey him without question, because not much time is left. The time has come to finally reclaim his empire. Meanwhile, a heated argument continued between Kuina and Ezebia. The girl said that if Roman was really a member of the Fernane family, then now the fact that her brother started preparing for war against the empire seemed quite logical. The plan was, with the support of the former ruling dynasty, to create a new state. It must be why they founded the Galayer Guild and started selling medicine. Pretending to help people suffering from the epidemic, they were going to expand the boundaries of their influence. The girl thought that she had been so stupid in a past life, that the war her brother started ended with his defeat, and she couldn't even imagine that an even more dangerous plan was hiding that could shake the entire empire. She remembered Dietrich's words, that the mage promised him power with which he could overthrow the emperor. And now the girl wondered what kind of power it was. Does this really have anything to do with sclerosis and the Ferning family? Azebia understood that she shouldn't have blindly believed that she only needed to fear his death, as she did in her previous life. She had barely returned to life and had already lost that opportunity. And now the girl didn't understand at all what to do. Soon night fell and the couple returned to bed. The heroine was overwhelmed by dreams in which she returned to the snowy forest. The silver forest turned to her and asked if she was sleeping now. The goddess asked if the girl was having a happy dream now. When Azebia realized where she was, she immediately screamed in horror. This was not a dream. The corpses of common people lay in front of her. A small girl leaned over her mother's corpse and cried. At that moment, a soldier with a huge sword was approaching her. The girl tried to stop him, but her voice seemed inaudible. She turned to the silver forest and said there was a child there in danger. However, the goddess said that Azebia had already died, that she couldn't do anything. She could only watch what was happening here. Then the heroine suddenly stood up and ran towards the girl. However, she could not escape beyond the place where she was standing. Her whole body seemed to be chained. Silver Forest told her to stop, that she couldn't do anything to them, but the heroine did not give up. She said she couldn't give up so easily. She had no abilities and couldn't change anything, but she would never give up. And the moment the soldier raised his sword, the body of little Azebia suddenly jumped from the ground. In the last moment, she managed to grab the girl and pull her away from the sword strike. The Silver Forest then spoke to her and told her that Azebia had finally chosen suffering, and that this is why he had entrusted his destiny to her. When the heroine lowered her eyes, she saw that instead of a girl, a goddess was looking at her. Now she realized that this was the same Silver Forest. The goddess said to forget it. There is no need to be afraid of Roman, because in a past life she entrusted her destiny to him. Silver Forest said that the destiny of the world is in her hands, and that she knows how to defeat Roman. She knows the solution, but she simply forgot it. But the goddess will help her. She will return her true strength. Silver Forest kissed the girl on the forehead and asked her to save this world. In the morning, Azebia was thinking about what she dreamed after moving to the Ryodan Empire. She had no contact with the Silver Forest. Not even in books was there a single mention of cases where it appeared to the guardians in this way. The girl doubted whether she could cope with all this. The Silver Forest entrusted the fate of the entire kingdom to her. It waits on her. She hopes that this time Arkai will not be a victim of war. The heroine leaned over the pot she used for her magical practice. She understood that she had to do everything possible to find a way to confront Roman. However, at that moment, strength abandoned her and she fell asleep on the sofa. After a while, Juanala woke up and asked her why she was still here. The man asked her if she had really spent all her strength. The thing is, a sprout appeared in a pot that was on the table near her. Azebia immediately ran to the pot, not believing what they heard. The sprout really stuck out of the earth. She was in shock because she was absolutely sure that it wasn't there. Suddenly, the petal turned into a huge root, which immediately rushed upwards. Kavana, and in the last moment, managed to push the girl away from the pot so she wouldn't be hit. A few moments later, it grew up to the very ceiling. Its branches grew in all directions. The couple didn't understand what it was. Then, the girl decided to tell the emperor about her dream. She said that a long time ago, when she first met the Silver Forest and had a dream, it said in it that it would return her true powers, and she realized that it was not an easy dream. However, Azebia didn't expect the strength to look like so much, although she thought there was even more. The emperor approached the roots and touched them, and then said that this was an unusual stem, that the tree seemed saturated with magic. There was much more in it than in all the plants the girl had grown before. The girl assumed that this was a divine revelation sent by the Silver Forest. The goddess said she entrusted the destiny of the entire world to her. As is known, all guardians weaken when they leave Archaea. The strength granted to her to protect the kingdom seemed to evaporate when she found herself in the empire. However, the Silver Forest returned it to her. Azebia was convinced that she had to save the world, and to do so she would have to defeat Roman. She hugged the emperor tightly and told him she was incredibly happy to be able to help. Juana looked again at the table where there was a pot with an enormous plant, saying it was very cool. Soon night fell, and the girl went to sleep in her bedroom. Suddenly, something woke her up. When she opened her eyes, she realized someone was standing in the room. When Asivia saw the man's face, she was very surprised. In the end, it turned out to be Quena. The girl said that he really scared her and asked when he would return. The man pointed to his leg and said it was injured. The girl assumed he had accidentally hurt himself when that stem grew, but he didn't even realize it. The emperor said that the way she spoke today about her own uselessness bothered him a lot. He was afraid to even imagine how many people the girl was trying to prove she was worth something to. However, none of them even suspected how much pain this caused her, not even herself. Suddenly, Azibia saw that the emperor was crying. The man said he was so pathetic. This whole time, he learned what kind of burden the girl had to bear. And yet, he let himself be drawn to her light, and the girl saved him. And now he dared to think he could protect her, and that made him feel terrible. Azibia asked what he was talking about, and Juana replied that he was still the same as when the girl pulled him out of that stable. Azibia asked how he knew about that stable. He remembered that day. Then the boy introduced himself to her as Marcus. She couldn't believe that Marcus was her husband, Juana. Then she understood everything. When she was little, she found a boy in the stable around her age. They wanted to go north together, but he was missing, and no matter where she looked for him, she couldn't find him. Kavana said he introduced himself as Marcus, a fake name. He was burning with shame, and he feared that in the future the girl would remember this. Because the sunlight itself came to save the three insignificant ones, stained with dirt and blood, he was so ashamed and couldn't bear it that he didn't dare confess to the girl. In fact, he also wanted to save Azibia. He wanted to become a true knight for her. Just like the girl herself, at some point she would have done anything just to be with him. Then, Juana asked his wife if she knew why he named the empire Rayadon. The thing is, it was once in the Rayadon Mountains where Azibia found him. The girl was in shock. She began to understand who the important person the emperor had once spoken of was. Even his political marriage was just a means to meet her. All this happened thanks to her. Azabai said that she didn't save him. Quanag himself escaped from that stable. Subsequently, it was he who initiated the revolution. It was he who freed tens of thousands of slaves from oppression. All this was solely Quanag's merit. Then, the girl approached the emperor and kissed him, telling him that she would no longer have to be ashamed, that she knew nothing about him, but that she had been looking for the bravest knight she had ever met for too long. She apologized for not recognizing him immediately. She also thanked him for coming back for her. Asivia remembered moments from her past life in which Quena did not leave her when she died. Now she understood that the Silver Forest had said it, entrusted the destiny of the entire world to her. But it seemed to her that only thanks to this person could she understand its full weight. The couple spent another night together, unable to resist the desire to be close to each other. Now that Azibia had Quena's life in her hands, she would do anything to save it. Noticing the tears in his wife's eyes, the emperor asked her if she was in pain. The girl realized that she wanted to take responsibility for all the lives the Silver Forest had entrusted to her. Then she said that now that she finally knew Quena, she was very happy. Asivia realized that she would never return to her past destiny now. When everything was over, the emperor brought the work record to the girl and asked her to look at it. Maybe she would find something suspicious. As the man said, it detailed who did what every hour. If you don't look closely, you might not notice any special details. Then, the girl asked the man if this part of the document seemed strange to him. It seemed to Asivia that something was wrong, but she couldn't figure out what it was. She asked Quanak to tell her again under what conditions Roman was being held. The man smiled and said he could tell her whatever she wanted. The emperor said that this document indicated the distribution of the room where he was located. There was not a single window. During the day, the door opened only twice. Even to deliver food, they sent 2 soldiers. Azibia said that no matter how good Roman was, he couldn't handle 2 at once without drawing attention. Kavana asked her not to rush. The girl could calmly carry out the investigation, think slowly about everything, and he would continue to take care of the empire's affairs. The girl laughed. She said that the man could already take her duties as empress away, because there was no problem that couldn't be solved in the name of the emperor. At that moment, something occurred to the girl. She said that it was all a matter of name. All guards were on duty for a certain time with every partner, except for one person. It was stated here that he only crossed paths with all the on-duty soldiers once at different times. They urgently needed to question this man, but the emperor said there might be a problem with this. The thing is, It was the same soldier whose appearance Roman adopted. He was immediately excluded from the list of suspects because he never regained consciousness after the attack. The girl thought that all this simply made no sense. Something was definitely wrong here. She just hasn't realized it yet. Ezebia suggested that this might be the work of a spy, as Roman and his brother had been using them for a long time. One of them was the male Edwin. When she spoke with Marion, she made it clear that there were other people besides him. Roman was guarded by 2 guards. If one of them was a spy, it means Roman used him to deal with the second one, and then slipped away, taking someone else's appearance. The work hours were distributed in such a way that no one could remember the soldiers' features or the period of their shift. This happened to absolutely everyone, so it will be easier to identify the spy. So the girl decided to ask which of the high officials could make adjustments to these documents. The emperor replied that it could only be Oslin or Jaxer. Quanek said that Roman almost killed the girl, of course. He ordered his closest assistants to monitor him. Thus, besides him, only these 2 people could influence the work schedule. The heroine said that she had most likely jumped to conclusions. This is just her assumption, and they don't have to be true. However, the emperor was tense. He said he should have immediately interrogated Oslin and Jaxer and followed them. The girl said she should follow her friends, but Juana said this had happened before. This happened before, and she should have expected it to happen again. You can't trust anyone. It turns out she almost ruined everything again. Hearing these words, Ezebia immediately hugged him, telling him she knew what he was thinking. When she learned that her brother wanted to kill her, she felt so alone that she doubted everyone. However, after reuniting with the emperor, she realized that, no matter what happened, she must not let her faith in a person completely disappear, and she hoped the man wouldn't torture himself as he did before. The girl definitely promised to do it. Find out the whole truth. Ezebia promised to find out where Roman was hiding and who this spy was, so that QAnon couldn't give up on his people. The next morning, the girl went to the underground laboratory and thought there must be a way to find Roman without interrogating Oslin. Or Jaxer. If you think about it, it is clearly associated with sclerosis. As soon as they realized that this disease was spreading through the Fire River, Roman appeared immediately, and if the girl starts developing a cure again, they won't even have to look for him. It seemed crazy, but Ezebia didn't care. She wanted to protect Juana just as he wanted to protect her, and she would do it with her power. She would create a lure and catch Roman. The girl used her power, and suddenly, a strange sound came from the pot behind her. A moment later, a small green sprout appeared in the pot.